owner of the US Mega Farm. Video is purement para intratnamiento y no infringe de recos de originales. Los derechos de la novela y la imagen son del autor original, no reclamamos propiedad. No te gusta esperar y quieres escuchar este fanfic completo ahora? Suscríbete a nuestro Patreon, donde encontrarás los mejores fanfics. Chapter 526. Grow. After Kinzu saw the man's face clearly, he smiled brightly and greeted him politely. Mr. Grow, we meet again. Woo, Grow saw Kinzu and struggled hard, trying to say something. Unfortunately, his mouth was tightly sealed with tape and he couldn't make any sound. Oh, look at me. Kinzu pretended to pat his forehead and said with a smile, so Mr. Grow can't speak now, I'm so sorry. As he said that, Kinzu walked forward and helped Grow to remove the tape on his mouth. But he used too much force, and although the tape was torn off, Grow screamed in pain. Kinzu, you yellow monkey, let me go quickly, or you will be in trouble. Although he had become a prisoner, the pride of being a white man made him look at Kinzu viciously, as if he was thinking about how to kill Kinzu. Pa. Kinzu reached out and gave the guy a loud slap, then rubbed his hands with a smile and said, I just heard a dead fly chirping again, did you hear it, Mr. Grow? Purr. Grow spit fiercely, looked at Kinzu with murderous eyes, and cursed. You damn yellow monkey, wait until I get out, I will definitely kill you. Pa. Kinzu slapped him twice with his backhand, so hard that even his hand hurt. Looking at the blood at the corner of Grow's mouth, Kinzu still had a smiling expression and asked, Mr. Grow, look, the fly is so worthy of a beating, what should I do? This time, Grow learned to be smart. He didn't say anything, but stared at Kinzu with a vicious look, as if he wanted to remember the man in front of him in his heart. Being stared at by Grow, Kinzu sneered twice, not talking, right? Pa. After 3 loud slaps in a row, Grow couldn't help it anymore, and cursed with a choked voice. I didn't say anything, why are you still hitting me? I'm happy, so what? Kinzu's expression was always smiling, even now. Although the words he said could make you angry to death, he still had a kind smile on his face, which made Grow shudder. Kinzu ignored Grow. After hitting me, he rubbed his sore hands and muttered, Alas, hitting people is really a hard job. After a few slaps, my hands are a little sore. Grow almost cried at the side. Brother, you hit me even though it hurts, isn't it intentional? Kinzu saw that the game was almost over, so he stopped talking to Grow. He took a broken stool, sat opposite him, and said coldly, Do you want to say it yourself, or let me teach you a lesson? Say. What? Grow's face showed a confused expression, which made Kinzu want to hit him again. Pa. Kinzu was no longer patient when he wanted to hit him. Damn him, he is still pretending to be stupid with me. Say it or not. Grow's face was almost like a pig's head, and there was no good spot on it. But even so, he still gritted his teeth and stood firm, with a very aggrieved look and a sad face, and asked, Wang, no, Mr. Clean, what do you want me to say? I really don't know what to say. Kinzu sighed and stood up. Why are there so many people who will not give up until they reach the Yellow River? Dia, is there any way to make him speak? Dia nodded and didn't say anything, but the confident smile on her face made Kinzu a little flustered. Okay, then I'll leave this place to you. I'll wait for your good news. Kinzu waved his hand and left the room. He stood alone in the corridor on the 2nd floor, looking at the empty hall. What are you going to do? As the door of the room was closed, Grow's scream came from inside, and then he cursed with some regret. Damn it, as a white man, are you so willing to work for a yellow monkey? But before he finished his words, he was replaced by screams, cursing and screaming helplessly. Dale was not as gentle as Kinzu. She did it step by step. She came up and used a big move directly. Even though Kinzu had some psychological preparation, he was still a little frightened by Grow's inhuman screams inside. After a long time, just when Kinzu couldn't hold on any longer, the screams finally subsided. Creaky. The bedroom doors pushed open, and Dale came out with a relaxed expression. Boss, okay, just ask whatever you want to ask. Kinzu shuddered, a little overwhelmed by the sudden sound of the door opening. After hearing Dale's words, he forced a smile and nodded, and walked in with a little unsteady steps. The situation inside was a little beyond Kinzu's expectations. The bloody scene he imagined did not appear. Grow was still sitting on the chair, but his whole body seemed to be a little limp. Sitting down opposite Grow again, Kinzu pretended to be calm and asked in a light tone, How is it? Mr. Gru, can we have a good talk? Hearing the voice, Gru shuddered involuntarily. What happened just now was so horrible that he didn't even have the courage to recall it now. Yes, I say, Mr. Clean, please let me go. Looking at Kinzu weakly, Gru begged with a pale face. Kinzu nodded without comment and said with a smile, Mr. Gru, you should know what I want to ask. Tell me what you know, then you will have a chance to negotiate terms, right? Gru was somewhat speechless when asked. Helplessly, he could only briefly explain the matter in a low voice. In fact, the matter was really simple. As the head of the Boston branch of the Guinness World Records, Gru knew something about the last certification of the bluefin tuna. So when he saw the bluefin tuna in the newspaper, he felt a little proud. Another item certified by our Boston was in the newspaper. These are all achievements. But when he saw the auction price with a long string of zeros, he could no longer remain calm. He felt that his worldview had collapsed. Damn, it's just a fish, okay? Do you have to be so crazy? But before his mentality returned to normal, he received news that the guy who certified the bluefin tuna last time would certify the bluefin tuna this time. With some trepidation and expectation, Gru naturally asked for the appraisal right and let the team to see the miracle in person. Originally, he was just purely curious and envious, and wanted to see the legendary item, but he didn't have any bad intentions. But when Gru found out that the owner of the bluefin tuna was just a Chinese, his heart changed. Chapter 527 Yamamoto U. It can't be said to be racial discrimination, but in the hearts of many white people, the status of Chinese people is indeed not very high. Even if this Chinese is a wealthy man. So the moment they met, Gru had some thoughts in his mind. And when he saw the two huge bluefin tuna with his own eyes, his thoughts became even more numerous. How much did a bluefin tuna sell for at the last auction? More than $6 million. What about these two now? Wouldn't they be able to sell for more than $10 million? The more he thought about it, the more excited Gru's heart became, but he had no idea what to do. When he was about to issue the appraisal certificate, a sudden flash of inspiration came to his mind. As long as the appraisal certificate was issued, it was estimated that the Chinese in front of him would start to hype and promote these two bluefin tuna. In that case, he would have even less chance. So he pretended that he didn't bring the appraisal certificate, found an excuse, and prepared to go back to think of a solution. After returning home, he locked himself in the room, thinking hard for most of the day, and he really thought of a solution that was not a solution. That is to cooperate with the person who auctioned the last bluefin tuna. Yes, cooperation. He had no other choice now. Although he was very greedy for the two bluefin tuna, for the sake of his own safety, he decided not to come forward directly, but to sell the news. Because no matter who the other party was, he would never want to see a few more bluefin tuna bigger than the one he bought on the market. In this way, he could negotiate the price with him. And the islander did not disappoint him. When he learned that there were two larger bluefin tuna, he was furious. Especially after the islander confirmed the authenticity of the news, he asked him to make a price directly. Gru did not hesitate at all and asked for $1 million, which almost made the islander vomit blood. After some bargaining, the price was finally agreed to be about $500,000. So what happened later was easy to understand. The islander who got the news directly sent people to sneak into the ranch, trying to steal or destroy the bluefin tuna. Kinzu frowned slightly, interrupted Gru and asked, "Do you know what the islander's name is and where he is now?" Gru didn't dare to hide it and answered honestly, "His name is Yamamoto Yu, as for where he is, I don't know." Kinzu nodded, took out his mobile phone and called Chenmu. After a moment, the phone was picked up, and Chenmu's somewhat excited voice came over. "Boss, what's wrong? Is there something wrong? Do you know which sushi restaurant in the island country auctioned the bluefin tuna last time? What's the name of the person in charge?" Chenmu was stunned when he heard it, but he reacted quickly and guessed the problem at once. He said in surprise, "Is it really those dwarfs?" Kinzu hummed lightly and asked, "Do you know what they are called? Which sushi restaurant are they from? Let me check it out. I can't remember it for a while." With that, Chenmu returned to the bedroom, turned on his computer, and checked the records. After about 2 or 3 minutes, Chenmu's voice sounded again, "Boss, I found out that it is a sushi restaurant called Yoshinoya, which is one of the top sushi restaurants in the island country. They have more than 300 branches worldwide." 300 branches? Kinzu was a little surprised. But thinking about how they could spend more than $6 million to buy a bluefin tuna, it was not surprising. It turned out to be a rich man. "Boss, I'm sorry, I didn't expect them to have such a big reaction." Chen Mu's tone was a little low. "Nothing, you are just a normal business method, it's just that those guys in the island country can't afford it." Qin Zhu smiled and waved his hand, looking unconcerned. "But them?" Chen Mu wanted to say something, but was interrupted by Qin Zhu. "Okay, you don't have to worry about these things, just go ahead with the auction as planned, I will settle this account with them." After hanging up the phone, Qin Zhu looked at Grow in front of him, a little hesitant. Logically speaking, getting rid of this guy here is a once-and-for-all solution, but there will always be some trouble if it is done this way. If someone accidentally gets a handle on him, it will be even more of a loss. Turning around and going out, Qin Zhu found Dale and whispered a few words to her. After Dale nodded to indicate that she understood, Qin Zhu left the scrap factory and drove away. Hearing the familiar sound of a car engine coming from the door of the villa, Eva and Mobica stood up at the same time and walked out excitedly. Shirley was watching from behind, a little confused. The sound of the TV was a little loud, and she didn't hear the sound of the car coming from the door. Shaking her head, she grabbed Dayu, who wanted to join in the fun. Shirley hugged the two chubby little guys and continued to watch TV. Why aren't you asleep yet?" After parking the car, Qin Zhu opened the door and looked at the two women in front of him with some surprise. Neither of the two girls spoke, and they threw themselves into Qin Zhu's arms. Eva even murmured, "It's good that everything is fine, it's good that everything is fine." Qin Zhu was a little touched in his heart, but he pretended to be indifferent on his face, and smiled helplessly. "What's the matter?" "I just went to ask something." "You guys, you think too much." The two girls didn't speak, hugged Qin Zhu tightly, and enjoyed this moment of peace. After a long time, Eva finally reacted, raised her head and asked, "Qin, where is my sister? Didn't she come back with you?" "No." Qin Zhu shook his head, looked at Eva's worried look, and smiled. "Don't worry, she's fine, she just sent someone back." The two girls nodded in relief. It seems that Qin Zhu didn't lie, and he really just asked something. Qin Zhu walked into the room with the two girls in his arms, and his brows frowned slightly. Why didn't this little girl go to bed? Looking at the time, it was already past 10 o'clock. Qin Zhu frowned even tighter. As if she noticed Qin Zhu's doubts, Eva next to her explained, "Qin, the little guy insisted on waiting for you to come back." At this time, Shirley finally found Qin Zhu, and she shouted loudly, opening her little hands to ask Qin Zhu to hug her. Shaking his head helplessly, Qin Zhu picked up the little girl and nodded her little head. It's so late, why don't you go to bed obediently? I want to wait for Uncle to come back and sleep with Uncle." The little girl blinked her big eyes, looking very well behaved and cute. It's just a pity that Qin Zhu was not deceived by her expression, but nodded the little girl's head, and laughed helplessly. "I don't know yet, you just want to watch TV, you want to deceive Uncle, that's impossible." P.S. It was originally a very happy thing that the national football team won today, but after scanning the book review area, Liu felt very depressed. The screen is full of apprentices. The comments are very pertinent, and it is obvious that the readers have been reading the book. However, after opening the information, there is no record of subscribing to the book. 1, 2, and 3 are still the same. Liu knows that this is not well written, and Liu is also working hard, but can we support the genuine version? After reading the pirated version, let's keep silent, so that we don't have to worry about it. Chapter 528 solved, exposed by Qin Zhu. The little girl stuck out her tongue in embarrassment, hugged Qin Zhu's neck, and said coquettishly, "No, Shirley is just waiting for Uncle to come back to sleep." Pinching Shirley's little nose, Qin Zhu smiled and said, Okay, go to bed quickly, staying up late is not what children should do." The little girl nodded obediently, looked at the TV that was still playing cartoons with some reluctance, and followed Qin Zhu upstairs to sleep. Just after coaxing the little girl to sleep, Qin Zhu heard the sound of a car coming from outside. Looking through the glass, it was Dale's car. Putting on pajamas, Qin Zhu opened the door and went downstairs. The Husky and Jaguar brothers who were napping in the living room were awakened by Qin Zhu's footsteps, and they got up one by one and looked at the stairs vigilantly. After seeing that it was Qin Zhu, the Jaguar brothers lay down to sleep again, while Dio and Xiao ran over. Qin Zhu picked up the two little guys and sat down on the sofa. He stroked the snow-white fur of the husky with his hands, and his face was expressionless. and he didn't know what he was thinking about, but his eyes flashed with fierceness from time to time. The door opened with a click, and Dale walked in with a rectangular package on her back. Looking at Kinzu sitting on the sofa, she nodded at him without a trace of surprise. Kinzu felt relieved, and his expression gradually eased. He asked, "How did you deal with it?" Shrugging, Eva sat opposite Kinzu, picked up the apple on the coffee table and took a bite, and said with a relaxed expression, "It was an accidental fire. The police can only come to this conclusion in the end. I promise." Looking at Dale, Kinzu felt a little uncomfortable. It seemed that she had killed 2 people after following him for a short time. This didn't seem to be a job for a bodyguard, right? Standing up and sitting next to Dale, Kinzu held her little hand and whispered, "Thank you for your hard work." Dale's movements froze. Being stared at by Kinzu's fiery eyes, she was a little at a loss with the apple in her hand. It was not right to put it to her mouth and eat it, nor was it right not to eat it. "No, nothing, boss, these are what I should do." Dale finished this sentence with a stiff face. Seeing that Kinzu wanted to say something, Dale quickly interrupted and said, "Boss, it's late, I'm going to bed first. Good night." Pulling her little hand away, Dale ran upstairs in a panic, as if there was a man-eating demon chasing her. Kinzu touched his nose. Was he that scary? The next morning, when Kinzu was riding a big horse with the little girl at the door, he received a call from William. "Hi, Clean, do you still remember Gro?" Kinzu's hand holding the reins tightened, and Xiaobai also stopped. "Remember, wasn't it this guy who held my certificate and refused to give it to me, causing my auction plan to be delayed?" "What's wrong? Didn't you say he resigned?" "Yes, he did resign, but I just got the news that there was a gas leak when he was sleeping at home, and the whole house was burned to charcoal." William's tone was full of emotion. He didn't expect that a colleague who worked with him a few days ago died tragically at home today. "Oh? When did this happen? Why didn't you see it on the news?" Kinzu dealt with William, but his mind was spinning rapidly. What did he mean by telling him this? Suspecting that he did it? Or was he trying to get him to talk? News? Ha, how can such a thing be on the news? The dead person is not a stupid or influential person. William sneered a few times with disdain, and then his tone calmed down a little, saying, "Well, it should have happened last night. I got the news this morning." Kinzu also sighed, and said in a low voice, "Oh, what a pity, we met a few days ago, how can it be gone just like that? Yeah, it's really sad." William's tone was a little sad, as if he recalled some bad things. After chatting for a few more sentences, Kinzu hung up the phone. Did he call me intentionally, or just to inform me? Kinzu was a little confused, and his mind was a little confused for a while, not knowing what to do. "Uncle, what's wrong?" Shirley in his arms raised her head and looked at Kinzu like a curious baby. "It's okay, let's go, let's continue riding the big horse." Kinzu lowered his head and rubbed the little girl's forehead. He smiled and squeezed his legs. He shook the reins, and Xiaobai understood and trotted. "Oh, ride the big horse, ride the big horse." Shirley sat in the front, dancing with excitement, and seemed to like the feeling of riding a big horse. It's just a pity that the little girl is too short. Even if the horse on the ranch is short, it is several heads taller than her. Not to mention that she can't ride it. Even if she can ride it, the women at home are worried. So only when Kinzu is interested will he call Xiaobai and carry her for a ride. Xiaobai is not too repulsive to this little guy. Anyway, he doesn't feel anything when sitting on his body, so he just treats it as pleasing the little master. Xiaobai is a little scared at the 2 little guys who often run behind him. This is not to say that he is afraid of them, but he has to take care of the feelings of the big guy at the door who is staring at him. Well, that's it. Xiaobai comforted himself in his heart. "I'm not afraid of you, I really am not afraid of you." But when he arrived at the door of the villa, Xiaobai still couldn't resist the pressure of the king of the forest and was scared. "Hey, you idiot, there is actually something that scares you." Kinzu looked at Xiaobai, who stopped in his tracks with some surprise. "Isn't this guy always lawless? He is actually afraid." "Shilulu," Xiaobai roared to the sky, "I'm not afraid of it, I'm just giving it face." Kinzu was a little speechless and a little depressed. He was almost amused by this idiot. Patting Xiaobai's handsome horse face, Kinzu teased, "Look, it's so thick here, no wonder you are so confident." Although teasing, Kinzu still turned over and got off the horse, holding the little girl, and walked into the villa. "Okay, go find Daha to play, Uncle still has some things to deal with." Patting the little guy's head, Kinzu called her and shoved her over, and he slipped away. Kinzu winked at Dale, and then he came to the office, sat in the boss chair, and waited quietly. Dale sat on the sofa in the living room, a little hesitant. No way. Why did he call her into the office so early in the morning? Especially when he saw the empty villa, Dale became even more flustered. Eva and Mobica had gone to the ranch to help. Now, except for Shirley and Erica who couldn't move upstairs, there were only two of them left. What did he want to do by calling her into the office now? Si est escuchando esta novela en un canal distinto a mundo fanfic novelas, significat lo descarga and y subir en cines fuerzos invitamos cordialmente a visitar nuestro canal. Mundo fanfic novelas all encontras la versión original de esta historia y podrás explorar muchas otras novelas de diversos narradores. Te esperamos para sumergirte en un mundo de novelas increíbles. Chapter 529 Unexpected Visitors. After hesitating for a long time, Dale straightened her back and walked into the office. There was no other way, because she was the boss. Hearing the sound of the door opening, Kinzu came back to his senses and nodded at Dale. Sit down. Sitting down opposite Kinzu, Dale looked at Kinzu's somewhat serious expression and asked, "Boss, what's wrong? Is there anything?" Kinzu rubbed his temples and repeated what happened in the morning in detail. Then he said, "Dale, are you sure that your arrangement will not be seen by others?" Dale's face also became a little serious. Thinking about her arrangement, she said affirmatively, "Boss, don't worry, there will be no accidents." Kinzu's heart was relaxed. Since Dale still insisted that there was no problem at this time, it meant that there was really no problem. By the way, how were Erica and the others? Have you given them medicine on time? Hearing Kinzu asking about Erica's condition, Dale's face became a little excited. She looked at Kinzu with admiration and said, "Boss, you are so amazing. Erica and the others can feel their changes every time." Kinzu waved his hand and smiled. "This has nothing to do with me. The old Chinese doctors I hired are amazing." After sending away the agitated Dale, Kinzu curled up on the sofa and fell into deep thought. The bluefin tuna has already started to be promoted, and the auction will start tomorrow night. I just don't know if the scene will be as intense as last time. And will Yamamoto Yu with Yoshinoya cause any trouble? Thinking of that guy, Kinzu turned on the computer and began to look up information about Yoshinoya. After looking for a while, Kinzu understood that this is a sushi restaurant founded in 1976. After so many years of development, the scale is now quite large. Just as Chain Mu said, Yoshinoya has more than 300 chain stores around the world. And there are large-scale fisheries near Homesawa and in Tokaido to supply the daily consumption of sushi restaurants. After watching for a long time, Kinzu frowned. This Yoshinoya is really a big guy. Not only is it a fishery, they actually have a wagyu breeding base in Kobe. Damn, it's really a troublesome guy. Rubbing his nose, he didn't expect that the pit set by Chain Mu would actually cause him such a trouble. Now it's useless to say anything, just pit it, the island country wharf. He is not afraid. However, he has to speed up his pace. Everything else is easy to say. The bodyguards must be equipped first. His life is very important. I can't care so much. It seems that I have to increase the dosage for them." Kinzu muttered to himself, and opened the system and exchanged 5 drops of spiritual liquid. When Erica drank the spiritual liquid at noon, she could clearly feel that her thighs felt stronger, accompanied by a slight itchy feeling. Could it be that it has started to heal so quickly? Erica looked at the ordinary beverage bottle in disbelief, and was so shocked that she could not express it in words. Moreover, she had an inexplicable feeling, that is, she had a deep attachment to the savior who rarely appeared. Yes, attachment, that's the feeling. Without mentioning the confused Erica, Kinzu waited for an unexpected person at the door of the villa. You know each other." Looking at the two beautiful figures walking down from the red ferry together, Kinzu felt a little dizzy. How could it be such a coincidence? They actually know each other. Before Kinzu came to his senses, Mobica next to him had already pounced on him and asked excitedly, "Sister Haley, why are you here too?" Fuck. Kinzu felt like 10,000 alpacas were galloping past. What the hell was going on? Haley greeted Mobica, walked with 2 slender, well-proportioned and straight legs, and came to Kinzu's side, with a faint smile on the corner of her mouth. "Mr. Clean, I didn't expect that we would meet again so soon. Is this what China often calls fate?" Kinzu's face darkened when he heard this, and the corners of his mouth couldn't help but twitch. What the hell is fate? If you had told me that you knew these two women earlier, why would I need your broken bird? Although he was complaining in his heart, Kinzu still had a peaceful smile on his face and greeted her. Miss Haley, I didn't expect to meet again so soon. It seems that it is really fate. At this time, Onid and Mobeka also found that something was wrong. It seems that this man of their family has some connection with their beautiful sister. Mobeka stepped forward, took Kinzu's arm, and asked with some vigilance. Clean, do you know each other? No, I don't know. Kinzu shook his head decisively. Hey, Master Haley is here. A slightly crisp voice sounded behind Kinzu. Hearing this, Haley turned her eyes away from Kinzu and turned to Heidi who was talking behind her. She smiled and clapped her hands. Baby, come here quickly, Mom misses you so much. Clean, don't you think you should explain it? Onid also came to Kinzu's side, hugged her arms and placed them on her chest, and her tone was a little resentful. It was not against Kinzu, she just didn't expect that she would bring a rival to her lover. Covering his head, Kinzu really felt like strangling Heidi to death. This little bastard always came out at the right time. Helplessly, Kinzu had to explain the whole thing from beginning to end. After listening, the expressions of the two girls eased a little, but the way they looked at Kinzu was still a little different. Kinzu was confused. He had explained it clearly, why was he still looking at him like that? But Mobeka's subsequent words made Kinzu feel like collapsing. Clean, you really didn't leave Heidi here on purpose just because Haley is pretty. Sitting in the living room, looking at the three women talking and laughing across from him, Kinzu felt so depressed. After all this time, it turns out that Haley is actually a student in the same grade as Mobeka. They had a very good relationship when they were in school. That's why Haley came here for vacation last time, one because of the beautiful scenery, and the other is to come and see her good sisters. But who knew that it wouldn't matter if she came here for a trip, but she lost her favorite parrot. After returning to New York, Haley felt more and more uncomfortable and worried. Just when she heard that Eva was coming to see Mobeka, she drove her here. But just after arriving in Boston, Haley received news that almost made her drive her ferry into the ditch. Thanks to Fengxi and Fake for their support, Chapter 530 Heidi is missing. My good sister actually knows that abominable guy. And judging from her feminine appearance, it is obvious that they have a special relationship. This made Haley feel very unhappy. Damn, I am playing with a bird, and it is fine if you snatch it from me. I am broad-minded and will not argue with you. But now, you even want to snatch my CP, this is simply intolerable. So as soon as they met, Haley gave Kinzu a little eye drops, so that Kinzu could only watch them chatting from the side. Fortunately, Onid was kind enough to chat for a while, then she remembered the purpose of this visit. She turned to look at Kinzu and asked, Clean, where is the calf you mentioned? Take me to see it. Kinzu breathed a sigh of relief and hurriedly said, it's still in the cowshed. Let's go now. Onid and Mobeka both nodded, but Haley shook her head, hugged Heidi in her arms, and said, you go, I will stay with my little baby for a while. Kinzu scratched his head, damn girl, do you know that it is very inconvenient for me to be here? But this was obviously not something that could be said directly, so Kinzu winked at Eva next to him, signaling her to keep an eye on this woman. When Eva nodded to show that she understood, Kinzu took the two girls and carried Shirley out of the door. There was no way, the little girl was still thinking about riding a big horse, so Kinzu had to take her with him. Kinzu rode Shirley, Mobeka rode a four-wheeled motorcycle with Onid, and two pairs of beast brothers followed behind. A group of 4 people and 4 beasts, facing the midday sun, walked towards the dairy factory in the waves of pasture that were drifting in the wind. Especially Xiaobai's snow-white figure, under the sunlight, it was even more sparkling. Soon, several people came to the dairy factory next to the cowshed. At this moment, old John was already waiting at the door. Boss, I have brought the calf back and locked it in the compartment. While walking inside, old John introduced, and his eyes kept glancing at Onid. He knew Mobeka, and the veterinarian could not be her. In other words, the little girl next to her was the protagonist of today. She is too young. As if aware of old John's concerns, Kinzu explained with a smile. Old John, don't look at Onid's young age, but she is now a graduate student, specializing in this field. Oh, so that's the case, Miss Onid, please come in. With an awkward smile, old John pushed open the door of a compartment and gestured you. Kinzu looked inside and saw a sturdy calf, more than 1 meter tall, blinking its big eyes in confusion, looking at the 4-legged monsters in front of it. It was enjoying the food, but was suddenly locked back. It thought it was dark at first, but it looked through the window and it was obviously not time yet. Onid, come and take a look. It seems that there is nothing wrong with this guy, but he is growing too fast. Shrugging, Kinzu made way and gestured to Onid. Onid nodded, walked into the compartment, stood a distance away from the calf, took out some tools from her backpack, and began to diagnose. Just as Kinzu said, although the calf eats a lot, it has no problem and its development is normal. Onid, who was full of confidence, was a little panicked. No way, it was the first time to see a doctor, and she met such a difficult guy. Since the appetite was so large, it meant that there must be something abnormal, but after checking, Onid had to admit that she really didn't find anything. Scratching her hair, Onid was a little crazy. It was really the first time she encountered such a new situation. Forget it, I can't see what's going on. After studying for a long time, Onid finally announced that she gave up. However, looking at Kinzu's somewhat disappointed eyes, Onid continued, "Let me draw a blood sample and take it back to the laboratory for another examination." Kinzu nodded, waved his hand indifferently, and motioned old John to come over to help. Although this old guy is so old, Kinzu estimated that if they really fought, he might not be able to beat this old guy. After Onid was done, the group returned to the villa, leaving the calf, who had received 2 injections, drawing circles alone in the small compartment. In the villa, Haley was alone on the sofa, having a boring conversation with Heidi in her arms, and Eva, who was listening to her, was sweating coldly. Good guy, she is even more boring than Kinzu. How empty is this woman's life? When Kinzu and his friends came in, Eva hurried upstairs and left these women to Kinzu. Fortunately, the women also knew their limits. After chatting for a while, they felt a little bored, so Mobika simply took the 2 women back to her own home. Anyway, with Haley here, she couldn't live here. After the 3 women left, Kinzu felt relieved. It is said that 3 women make a drama, and this is indeed true. With them present, Kinzu felt a little uncomfortable. Perhaps, this is also related to the fact that one of them has a grudge against him. Thinking of the grudge, Kinzu realized that something seemed to be missing in the villa. Where's that little bastard? Kinzu muttered in confusion. Shirley blinked her big eyes twice and curled her lips. Uncle, you cursed. Kinzu sweated a little and quickly explained, what nonsense are you talking about? Uncle didn't curse anyone, Uncle was just cursing a bird. Oh? Uncle is cursing Heidi. Shirley's little brain reacted quickly, thinking for a while, and asked in confusion. But Heidi didn't make any mistakes, why scold her? Kinzu rolled his eyes. Little girl, do you have 100,000 whys? Little girl, have you seen that Heidi thing? It seems that you don't see it now. Heidi was taken away by Sister Haley, she said she told you. The little girl blinked her big eyes and looked at Kinzu with an innocent look. Took her away? Kinzu sat up suddenly, staring at Shirley. Yes, Uncle, didn't you see? When she was about to get in the car, Heidi was still in her arms. The little girl was a little confused. She thought Kinzu deliberately let her take her away. After all, she originally belonged to her. Kinzu didn't say anything. He picked up his phone and called Mobika. Honey, what's wrong? Do you miss me so soon? Mobika sat in the passenger seat, with a teasing tone in her tone. Kinzu scratched his head and didn't waste time talking to Mobika. He asked directly, is Heidi with you? Did she take Heidi away? Chapter 531 Shirley's little hobby. Heidi? Mobika was stunned for a moment, and glanced at Haley next to him. Haley, did you bring the parrot out? Haley reached out and unbuttoned the button of her shirt under Mobika's curious eyes. I'm dying of suffocation, I'm dying of suffocation. As soon as the button was unbuttoned, Heidi's little head popped out from inside, and her little mouth opened and closed and yelled. Kinzu on the other end of the phone covered his head. When did this woman do it, and why didn't he notice it? Looking at her good sister who was smiling like a little fox, Mobika shook her head helplessly and said to Kinzu on the phone with a smile. Okay, Clean, don't worry, I will help you take good care of Heidi and will never let anything happen to her. Kinzu had already taken her out, what else could he do? He had to helplessly tell her. You must take good care of this guy and don't let him run around. He is not honest. If he is harmed by some guys, it will be too late to regret it. Mobika smiled and nodded in agreement. After hanging up the phone, she looked at Haley helplessly and asked, do you like parrots so much? Why don't you raise one yourself? Haley was so depressed when she heard this. She almost stepped on the accelerator with force. At the same time, she explained the whole story to her good sister. You mean, this guy was originally raised by you? Mobica pointed at Heidi in a daze. What a joke. This little guy was raised by her good sister. Let alone the surprise of the two Mobica girls, Kinzu was holding the little girl and went outside to ride a big horse. Little girl, do you like riding horses so much? Kinzu looked at the little girl in his arms with some curiosity. Why didn't he realize that she had this hobby before? Yes, uncle, riding a horse is fun. Shirley nodded excitedly, then made a bitter face and sighed. It's just that the horse is too tall, Shirley can't reach it. Kinzu looked at the little girl's frowning face and almost laughed out loud. It's not that Kinzu has a low sense of laughter, it's just that the little girl's chubby face made this expression. It's so cute. Back to the villa, Kinzu went upstairs and turned on the computer. He remembered that there seemed to be a kind of dwarf horse in the world. He didn't know whether it was true or made up by netizens. After searching in the morning, Kinzu really found the figure of dwarf horses, and there was more than one kind. After a closer look, Kinzu determined his goal, which was the most popular European dwarf horse in the world. European ponies, also known as miniature horses, have an average height of 80 centimeters, a body length of about 100 centimeters, and a weight of 50 to 100 kilograms. Because of its small stature, generally 50 to 60 centimeters in height, and well-proportioned body, it is very suitable as a pet. Therefore, its price is also very expensive, with a value of hundreds of thousands, making it a symbol of nobility. Kinzu doesn't care about the price. He is mainly concerned about the breeding method. If it is too troublesome, then he has to think about it. Fortunately, although the ponies are a little smaller, the breeding method is no different from other horse breeds. The difference is that although the miniature horse is short, it is also strong, highly adaptable, not easy to get sick, and simple and extensive management. There are no special conditions and restrictions. It can be raised in the yard where dogs can be raised. Seeing this, Kinzu was completely relieved. Just then, Shirley came up. Kinzu called the little girl over, pointed at the pony on the computer screen, and said with a smile, "Shirley, take a look. Do you like this one?" The little girl's eyes suddenly lit up, and she was surprised to get close to the screen, as if she wanted to see clearly whether it was really that tall. After looking at it for a long time, Shirley began to gesture with her hands on her body in Kinzu's inexplicable eyes. After a while, she turned her head and looked at Kinzu with pitiful eyes. "Uncle, is it as tall as Shirley?" "Well, this one." Kinzu looked it up and down, scratched his head, and it seemed that this guy was really taller than the little girl. Ahem, just a little bit taller. There was no way. In the pitiful eyes of the little girl, Kinzu had to lie against his will. Hearing this, Shirley's face suddenly blossomed with a smile like a snow lotus. She clapped her hands happily and shouted, "Uncle, that's great. Are you going to find a pony for Shirley?" Kinzu smiled and nodded, pinched the little girl's nose, and teased, "Buy it, Uncle will buy it for you. As for whether it can be in your hands, it depends on whether you are good or not." Shirley climbed out of Kinzu's arms and looked at Kinzu with extremely sincere and pious eyes. "Uncle, Shirley will definitely be very good in the future. Just buy Shirley a pony, okay?" The little girl used her tender voice to act coquettishly, and Kinzu felt that he could not yell anymore. The fatherly love hidden in the deepest part of his heart suddenly surged up. Okay, whatever our little baby says is fine." Pinching the little girl's nose with his hand, Kinzu felt that at this moment he was really looking at his own child, and the feeling in his heart was so warm. After getting the answer she wanted, Shirley jumped up, her two little feet bouncing on the ground, like a happy elf. Before Kinzu could react, he saw the little girl running out. "Ah, this girl, she won't burn the bridge so quickly, will she?" 3 black lines appeared on his head. Kinzu got up and followed her downstairs, wanting to teach the little girl a lesson and let her know that she should be kind. Just as he stepped on the stairs, he heard a burst of laughter. "Wow, little cutie, your uncle agreed to buy you a pony. This is really a happy thing." Eva hugged Shirley and gave the cute little girl a big kiss. "Yes, Sister Eva, Shirley will take you out to play on the horse later, okay?" The little girl looked at Eva expectantly. "Of course, when the pony comes back, I'll let Shirley take me for a ride." Eva smiled at the lovely Shirley in her arms, lowered her head and kissed her smooth forehead gently, without exposing her. "The pony can only take one person." "What are you talking about?" Laughing so happily, Kinzu came over, took both of them into his arms, and looked at them with a smile. "Uncle, when are we going to buy a pony?" Shirley squeezed into Kinzu's arms, did not answer Kinzu's question, but looked at him expectantly. Kinzu touched his chin, pondered for a while, and said, tomorrow I'll help you see where there are ponies for sale around. The little girl nodded excitedly. Her little face was a little red with excitement. She did not expect that Kinzu would fulfill her wish so quickly. Chapter 532 Australian Miniature Horse. Kinzu kept his word. After breakfast the next day, he changed into a blue casual outfit and went out with the little girl dressed like a little princess and Dale who had light makeup on. He originally wanted to bring Eva with him. It had been a long time since they had gathered together to have a good time. But Eva pointed upstairs and shrugged. I'm going to, so what about them? In the end, Kinzu had no choice but to take Dale and Shirley and drive the Cadillac to the outside of the ranch. The little girl sitting in the safety seat had two beautiful braids and was wearing a light blue princess skirt. Her big eyes blinked and stared out the window. Even when she was sitting in the seat, her two little feet were not honest. They swayed back and forth, making Kinzu dizzy. From time to time, she hummed a few tunes that Kinzu didn't understand. Kinzu scratched his head. Isn't it just a pony? Is it necessary to be so happy? Although he didn't understand, Kinzu didn't bother the little girl's good mood. He sat in the front and exchanged feelings with Dale who was driving from time to time. With Dale driving steadily, the Cadillac soon arrived at the neighbor's house that he hadn't seen for a long time. After turning off the interstate highway, the Cadillac entered a dirt road and drove for a while before arriving at the gate of a farm. The first place Kinzu came to today was Old York's farm. After deciding to buy a pony yesterday, Kinzu started to contact people. Originally, he thought that this kind of horse would not be very common, but he knew that a call came to Old York, and he happily told Kinzu that he had a few good seedlings. So, Kinzu made an appointment with him to meet and talk this morning. Looking at the gate of Old York Ranch, the unique gate with a sheep's head hanging on it, Kinzu suddenly remembered that his own gate needed to be improved. Apart from anything else, there is still no Chinese sign at the gate of his house. After a few minutes of random thoughts, the Cadillac passed through the gate and stopped at the door of a ranch villa that looked very stylish. Ha, Old York, long time no see, you are still so strong. Kinzu gave Old York a big hug as soon as he got out of the car, which made the old man a little dazed. Hey, Clean, what's wrong with you? Old York pushed Kinzu away, looked at him with a vigilant face, and said, I remember there is an old saying in China, which is to ignore those who are either traitors or thieves. Which one do you belong to? Kinzu's eyes went dark. When did this old man learn Chinese, and he spoke it fluently? Okay, I won't talk to you anymore. Kinzu waved his hand, surrendered actively, and went straight to the point. Where is the horse I want? Take me to see it. Old York also smiled, turned around and walked to their stable on the side, saying, Clean, this is not the first time you come here, do you still need me to lead the way? Kinzu rolled his eyes, picked up Shirley from the back seat, and then, led by Old York, went to the stable. By the way, Old York, why don't you see Lucy? Kinzu was a little confused. He just looked around, but didn't find Old John's precious granddaughter. He still wanted the two children to have some emotional exchanges. Old York shrugged. Clean, are you really confused? Lucy went to school and it's not holiday yet. Ah, school? Kinzu opened his mouth wide. Old John nodded and said with a smile, Lucy is 6 years old this year and it's time to go to school, so I sent her to school to let her experience the school atmosphere first. Kinzu shrugged and smacked his lips with some regret. It seems that the plan to let Shirley expand her network of contacts has gone down the drain. Following Old York, he continued to walk inside. After passing a dozen stables that were either empty or full, Old York's footsteps finally stopped at the door of a stable. Kinzu looked inside and immediately opened his mouth in surprise. There were 5 or 6 ponies of different colors, but almost as tall as children, looking at them curiously. Clean, these are the ponies I raise. They are miniature horses from Australia, Falais-Bellard from Argentina, and Shetland ponies from Shetland Island in northeastern Scotland, UK. Old York pointed to the few ponies inside and introduced them carefully to Kinzu. As Old York introduced, Kinzu kept nodding and picked up Shirley so that she could see the situation inside. The first one Kinzu ruled out was the pony named Falais-Bellard from Argentina introduced by Old York. As for why? It's very simple, it's too small. Although Kinzu came to buy a pony, he didn't come to buy a puppy. What's the point of getting a little one that is only 20 to 30 centimeters tall? Although Shirley is relatively small, she is almost 1 meter tall. It's better to let her go back to Right Daha than to buy such a big pony. Well, the premise is that Daha grows up quickly. After ruling out Falabella, Kinzu hesitated between the Australian miniature horse and the Shetland pony. The body shapes of the two horses look similar, with small heads and wide foreheads, big eyes and small and upright ears, well-opened nostrils, short backs, muscular waists, and wide and strong hind legs. Especially the short and strong limbs, which seem to have good load-bearing capacity. After discussing with the little girl in his arms for a long time, the two finally chose the Australian miniature horse. There was no other reason, just because there was only one Australian miniature horse here at Old York, which was a satin black colour. The other ponies were more or less mottled and did not look as pleasing to the eye as this one. Seeing that Kinzu had made his choice, Old York opened the stable and let out the pure black Australian miniature horse with a pair of bright big eyes. Walking out of the stable with the miniature horse, Old York smiled and said to Kinzu, "Clean, you really have good taste. You picked the best one here." Kinzu glanced at this guy. "Old York, are you sure this is not a prelude to your later offer?" What's that, Clean? Let the little baby come over and try riding it." Old York laughed and changed the subject directly. Kinzu curled his lips. "This old fox." Shirley followed with a little excitement. When they came outside, Kinzu smiled and looked at the little pony that was quietly waiting. "Little girl, do you want your uncle to carry you up this time?" Shirley shook her head and looked at the pony that was only one head taller than her. She began to climb up with both hands. It was because the miniature horse had a good temper and a strong physique. If it was an adult male horse that was tossed by Kinzu like this, it would probably fly over with a hoof, right? Shirley's efforts were not in vain. After tossing the pony for a while, she finally announced proudly, "Uncle, come and help me, I can't get up." Chapter 533 Christine's Gratitude. Little girl, you really need exercise." Kinzu covered his forehead, came over and picked up the little girl, and easily put her on the back of the pony. I don't know if it was Kinzu's illusion, he always felt that the pony seemed to breathe a sigh of relief, as if saying, "Good guy, you finally got up." Sweat a little, Kinzu watched from the side, and asked Shirley to shake the reins gently. Shirley heard it and shook the reins obediently. The pony also gave face and started to walk slowly forward. At the beginning, Shirley was still a little nervous and held Kinzu's big hand and refused to let go. Later, she found that the pony was not walking fast, so Shirley was relieved a lot, let go of Kinzu's big hand, and began to try to control the pony slowly. I don't know if it's because of the frequent contact with spiritual energy, the little girl is smarter than ordinary children, and she is not slow to learn things. After a while, she can ride the pony around by herself. Kinzu looked at it for a while, and after finding that there was nothing wrong, he came to Old York with his hands folded, pretending to be in pain, and said, "Okay, you name a price." Old York laughed, and without any politeness, stretched out a palm and shook it in front of Kinzu. "Oh, $500. So cheap." Kinzu shouted in surprise. Old York's hand paused, and continued to shake. "Well, $5,000. Kinzu touched his chin and said thoughtfully, "It's a bit much. I bought an adult quarter horse, and this is the price, right?" Old York couldn't keep calm anymore. He looked at Kinzu with a twitching mouth, trying to confirm whether he was joking. But after looking at it for a while, he was a little disappointed. This guy didn't know how many days he hadn't washed his face, and his expression was unchanged. It was really hard to tell. "Clean, $50,000, this is the lowest price." Old York didn't play dumb, and directly looked at Kinzu and quoted his price. The expected rage did not occur. Kinzu's reaction was much calmer than Old York expected. There was even a faint smile on his lips. Kinzu looked at Old York with a smirk on his face and teased, "Old York, look at you, why didn't you say it earlier? Why are you still playing dumb with me?" He rolled his eyes. Now it was Old York's turn to be depressed. What kind of person is this? Is this the legendary Chinese Tycoon? Soon, in Old York's reluctant eyes, Kinzu and him completed all the formalities. In other words, from now on, this Australian miniature horse officially belongs to Kinzu. Kinzu came outside with the pony and looked at the Cadillac he drove. He was a little embarrassed. Why did he think of driving a Cadillac? Wouldn't it be better to drive a pickup truck? "Well, Old York, it seems that I have to trouble you again." Kinzu shrugged his shoulders and had no choice but to ask Old York for help. "Ha, no problem, Clean, you guys go first, I'll send the mini pony to you right away." Old York was very straightforward. He agreed right away, and decided to send it over in person. Sitting in the car to the ranch, the little girl was still very excited, asked Kinzu for a cell phone, and called Christine. As soon as the call was connected, before Christine could speak, the little girl excitedly shouted, "Mom, Mom, Uncle bought me a pony today." Pony? Christine, who had just gotten up and was sitting in the restaurant eating breakfast, was stunned when she heard this. Did she buy a toy? Yes, a pony. It's fun, all black, so beautiful. At this point, the little girl's voice became a little low, and she said aggrievedly, "It's just that the pony is a little tall, and Uncle has to hold Shirley to get on it." The more Christine listened, the more she felt something was wrong. Was it not a toy? Did she really buy a pony? "Shirley, what does the pony your uncle bought you look like? Can it walk by itself?" Shirley scratched her hair in confusion and asked in a low voice, "Mom, is there a pony that can't walk?" Christine was a little embarrassed, and at the same time she confirmed one thing, that is, Kinzu really spent a lot of money to buy a pony for his daughter. Thinking of the price of the pony, Christine smiled bigly. It seems that she owed too much favor. After chatting for a while, Shirley handed the phone to Kinzu. "Uncle, Mom is looking for you." After answering the phone, Christine first cared about what happened a few days ago, and then said gratefully, "Clean, thank you so much, not only for troubling you, but also for making you spend so much money." Kinzu waved his hand and said indifferently, "Chris, this is your fault. This is not just your problem, but it requires everyone's help to make the little girl happier, right?" Christine didn't care whether Kinzu could see it or not. She smiled gratefully. Kinzu's attitude made her feel very comfortable. None of this has to do with money, because all of this requires feelings to slowly cultivate. Soon, not long after the morning sun rose, Kinzu returned to the ranch. The roar of the car engine startled many birds in the ranch. However, a few wild deer were not afraid of the roar of the car and kept wandering around the woods, as if they wanted to go in, but they were afraid of danger. Kinzu had just stopped the car at the door when he saw Old York driving a pickup truck and bringing the pony to him. "Hi. Old York, thank you very much. Come in and have a cup of tea?" Kinzu greeted politely. "No need for tea, next time. My family is harvesting hay today, and I have to go back to help." Old York waved his hand, put the pony down, and drove away in a flash. Shrugging his shoulders, Kinzu was a little embarrassed when he led the pony after Old York left. Where should he put this thing? Stable? Wouldn't that be a bit far? In the villa? Don't joke, it's estimated that in a few days, my villa will be uninhabitable. And the foal is not something you can just buy. You need to find someone to take care of it afterwards. It's obviously too late for Eva to take care of it alone. Not to mention that there are more than a dozen female soldiers in the villa who need to eat. Just taking care of herself is enough to make her tired. But besides Eva and Dale, who else can I use? John. Liam. Oriel. Uncle, what are you doing? The little girl waited for a long time, but Kinzu didn't bring her foaling, so she ran out to look at Kinzu, fearing that something was wrong. "Nothing, Uncle is just wondering where the foal will sleep at night." Kinzu touched the little girl's head and explained with a smile. Chapter 534 New Discovery on the Seabed. "Of course I sleep with Daha and the others." "Uncle, you won't let the pony sleep outside, will you?" The little girl pouted, looked at Kinzu with a worried look, and added, "It will be sad." Rolling his eyes, Kinzu thought, "I don't know if it is sad or not. If I let it sleep in the house, then I should be sad." "Hey, Shirley, you see, the ponies all live in the stables. If you let it live at home, it will not be used to it." Kinzu squatted down, gesturing with his hands, trying to persuade the little girl to let the pony sleep outside. However, before he finished speaking, he saw the pony next to him, as if he had found some new toys, raised his little hoof, and ran into the villa like a spoiled child. Kinzu was stunned. "Boss, you can't be so quick to slap me in the face, okay?" Shirley giggled and said, "Uncle, look, the pony likes to be in the villa. Okay, let's go and see why this guy is running so fast." Kinzu shrugged, stood up and walked back to the villa with Shirley. As soon as he entered the door, Kinzu saw the pony, but now the guy's situation is not very good. In front of him, two little tigers looked at it vigilantly, and a muffled groan came out of their throats, which seemed to be very domineering. Of course, the premise is that it has to grow up a little bit, because now the little girl thinks they are very cute and pounced on them directly. As for the pony, it was surrounded by Daha and Shiaha. The two guys stared at the pony with a covetous look, as if they wanted to pounce on it. However, the pony didn't pay any attention to them at all, and wandered around the villa alone, as if he didn't take them seriously. Kinzu was a little embarrassed. This boss is really bold and calm. Kinzu leaned forward and pushed her and shoved her aside. He held the pony's head with his hands and rubbed it with a smile. "What should I do with you, little guy? Do I really let you sleep in the villa?" Eva came over this time, looked at the pony in front of Kinzu, and said with a smile, "Boss, it's okay to put it in the villa, but the premise is that you have to make them as obedient as Daha, and go outside for defecation and urination." Kinzu shrugged helplessly. "If I can do it, I won't be entangled with this problem." Eva looked at Kinzu in surprise, shook her head and said in disbelief, "Oh, Clean, this is really not like what you said. When did you have so little confidence in yourself?" "Okay, I admit that I have no confidence." Kinzu spread his hands. He didn't want to keep another useless pony as a pet. Eva looked at Kinzu with some curiosity, not understanding why he said that, but didn't say anything more, but smiled and said, "Okay, then leave this matter to me, I will help you train it." "You?" Kinzu was a little surprised. "Of course, Clean, don't forget, I have been raising horses for so many years." Seeing that Kinzu seemed a little unconvinced, Eva immediately waved her little fist to demonstrate her confidence. "Okay, then I'll leave it to you." Kinzu stuck the pony into Eva's hand, and went to the door to find his white tiger. Speaking of riding a horse, that's simply weak. It would be so awesome if you could ride a tiger. But Kinzu was a little worried. It is said that tigers are very strong. What if he accidentally broke it apart? After lunch, Eva suddenly found Kinzu after feeding Erika and the others medicine. "You said you wanted to buy a cage. Then why don't you go?" Kinzu heard that Eva was going to buy a cage for the pony and waved his hand indifferently. He was now teasing his harpy eagle on the second floor. Speaking of harpy eagles, Kinzu felt that his original idea was wrong. Raising a big one was really not fulfilling. It was better to raise it from a young age. Eva covered her head. Did this guy listen to her? Helpless, Eva had to repeat it again. "Clean, let me ask you, do you want to make a special nest for your little guys? A doghouse?" Kinzu scratched his head. "Are they sleeping well now?" Eva rolled her eyes. "Do they have a nest now? They either sleep on the sofa or the carpet. They clean up every day." Seeing Eva like that, Kinzu smiled awkwardly. "Okay, do whatever you say. I listen to you." Eva was satisfied and drove the car out of the villa and drove to Revere. After Eva left, Kinzu let the eagle fly away, closed his eyes and lay on the recline, turning his vision to cheese. These days, Kinzu has not been idle. He has not wasted the 1 hour training time every day. The reason why Kinzu did not use this killer weapon when someone entered the ranch that night was that he got cheese out. Yes, got him out. As for where? To be honest, he didn't know either. He could only roughly sense the direction, which was on the Cape Cod side. With his sight shifted, Cheese opened his bright eyes, shook his nearly 8-meter-long body, and began to swim on the seabed. The reason why Kinzu brought Cheese here was, on the one hand, to train Cheese's ability to survive in the wild, and on the other hand, of course, for that treasure on that ship. It's just a pity that when Kinzu uses the treasure hunting technique, he must ensure that he is also within the treasure range. And here in Cape Cod, it must be beyond the exploration range of the treasure hunting technique. As for why Kinzu didn't go there, Kinzu said that he couldn't leave. Every day, his wife and children are warm and comfortable, and he really doesn't want to go out. If it weren't for making Cheese stronger, he wouldn't bother to come here. After wandering around, Kinzu swung his big tail in boredom and found a place to descend to the bottom of the sea. The seabed is really too big, and this place is worthy of being a treasure land for fishing bluefin tuna. Kinzu has found no less than 20 bluefin tuna in the past few days. Of course, they are basically the type of 2 or 3 meters long. He has never found one that is more than 3 meters long. Just when Kinzu was lying on the seabed and was about to move his sight back, he felt a dark cloud passing by his head. Damn, where did the dark cloud come from? Kinzu looked up and suddenly opened his mouth in surprise. What appeared in front of Kinzu was a fish that he was very familiar with, the manta ray, or devilfish. The devilfish in front of him did not look very big, with a body length of about 4 meters but less than 5 meters. The reason why Kinzu felt like a dark cloud was because their wings were always spread out. However, what surprised Kinzu was not the size of the manta ray, but their way of hunting. Yes, the manta ray that Kinzu saw was hunting a group of small sardines. Thank you for your support, 10-years-old worm. I'm grateful for your company along the way. Thank you. I recommend a ranch article by my brother, South Australia Ranch. Personally, I think his writing is more like a ranch article than mine. Chapter 535. Feeling of unrest. A flash of blue electricity passed by, and the sardines that were still running wildly in front of him suddenly stopped moving and began to sink slowly. Fuck, when did the manta ray discharge electricity? This is an electric ray. Kinzu felt a little numb all over his body. Even though he was still some distance away from the manta ray, he felt uneasy. With a flick of his tail, Kinzu turned and slid to the side. Damn, he was so unlucky that he actually ran into an electric thing. What is the most difficult thing to mess with on the seabed? In addition to sharks and other brutal predators, it must be those guys with electricity. Maybe sometimes, they don't do it intentionally, but just discharge electricity subconsciously. But after all, water is conductive. If you shiver unconsciously, we will suffer a little. Putting the cheese in a group of underwater reefs, Kinzu just wanted to shift his vision back, but he suddenly felt a palpitation in his heart. This was not his own feeling, but the feeling sensed by the cheese. But this feeling came and went quickly. In the blink of an eye, he could not feel anything. Kinzu was a little confused. What was going on? While he was confused, he saw that the sardines that were swimming happily in the reefs not far away turned around and ran madly. Fuck, what's going on? Kinzu couldn't help but shudder. He always felt that something was wrong, but he couldn't tell. And this was just the beginning. The next scene completely stunned Kinzu, who was hiding in the reefs. Sardines, cod, tilapia, turbot, blue marlin, tuna, countless kinds of fish, either hurriedly or dazedly passed over his head, and the seawater was stirred into chaos. Damn, what's going on? Kinzu suddenly jumped out of the reefs. He didn't care what was going on and followed the big group first. Mixed in a group of blue marlin, Kinzu ran with the fish. Why did they run? He wanted to know too. Unfortunately, these guys were not human, so even if he asked, he would not get any answers. So he might as well follow them. What made Kinzu particularly uneasy was that these big fish, which usually hid far away when they saw him, did not even look at him now. They just swam on their own, as if the huge creature beside them did not exist at all. After swimming for a while, Kinzu gradually calmed down, but suddenly reacted and stopped immediately. Fuck, why am I with them? Are they really scared? Kinzu muttered in frustration, and left the group, swimming towards the ranch according to the direction in his mind. No matter what those guys were trying to escape for, it would be right for him to return to the ranch. If he followed them, he might be taken to some ditch. Not to mention, in just a short while, he was taken a lot further away from the ranch by these guys. After explaining to Cheese and letting it go back to the ranch by itself, Kinzu retracted his vision. Thinking of the strange scene just now, Kinzu scratched his head. He was also confused by these guys. Maybe they ran away because they encountered a group of sharks. Just as he was comforting himself here, there was a sound of a car at the door. He looked over and saw that it was Eva who came back. Walking downstairs quickly, Kinzu saw Eva struggling to move some things to the door of the villa. He hurriedly took 2 steps forward and took them. He asked in confusion, "What did you buy? Why so many?" Eva wiped the sweat from her forehead and said with a smile, "Dockhouses, all kinds of models. I saw that there is one that is very suitable for fools. Assembled by yourself." Kinzu took one apart and took a look. He actually needed to assemble it himself. "Yes, it's okay anyway. I also bought paint. We can paint it in the colors we like." Eva smiled and took out a few cans of paint from the car, saying as if offering treasures. Needless to say, Kinzu knew that this must be what she prepared for Shirley. Kinzu helplessly stretched out his hand and pinched her little face. You only know how to spoil the little girl." Eva smiled, didn't say anything, but went into the house and brought the little girl out. The little girl led the pony and looked at Eva curiously while walking. "Sister Eva, didn't you go to buy a house for Snowflower?" Snowflower? Kinzu was a little stunned. This name was so familiar, it seemed that he had heard it often. "Yes, uncle, how about the name I gave to the pony? Is it nice?" Shirley heard Kinzu's muttering, ran over excitedly, and looked at him expectantly. Kinzu felt a little awkward being stared at by the little girl, so he had to touch her little head and praised, "It's really nice, how Shirley is good at naming." However, in his heart, Kinzu was sweating a little. Damn it, this name must not be known by Lin Zhu, otherwise, I really don't know how I died. Qin Zhu felt a little chilled when he thought of the scene where Lin Zhu chased him with a kitchen knife on the street after knowing this name. When he brought the little girl to the porch, Eva had already dismantled the things. Many small wooden boards were piled together, which made Qin Zhu dizzy. On the contrary to Qin Zhu, Shirley looked at these things and showed a very interested expression after listening to Eva's introduction. She urged, "Sister Eva, please teach me quickly. Let's build a house for the pony together." Seeing this, Eva showed a triumphant smile to Qin Zhu. Sure enough, all children like this kind of game. Thinking back to the past, she was tricked by her father to do housework many times because she liked these things. If it was written down, it would be a guide for children to avoid being cheated. Qin Zhu was not very interested in these things at first, but after watching the two girls for a while, he inexplicably found it very interesting. So, in the early autumn afternoon, under the warm sunshine, in front of a super luxurious villa, a man and two women played house. Well, this is not the same as that. After working for more than an hour, Qin Zhu finally breathed a sigh of relief. "Well, uncle, we're finally done." The little girl stood up, clapped her white and tender hands, and said excitedly, "Uncle, come on, take a picture of Shirley. Shirley wants to show it to her mother." Qin Zhu smiled and lifted her little nose. "Little girl, don't be anxious, it's not finished yet." "Huh? What else?" The little girl turned around and looked around, as if she was afraid that something was missed. "Not there." Qin Zhu smiled and shook his head, pointing to Eva opposite. Look over there." "Ahem, classmate honey, let's stay in China honestly. There are risks abroad, and we need to be cautious when going abroad." Si est escuchando esta novela en un canal distinto a mundo fanfic novelas, significat lo descarga and y subir en cines fuerzos invitamos cordialmente a visitar nuestro canal. Mundo fanfic novelas all encontrar la versión original de esta historia y podrás explorar muchas otras novelas de diversos narradores. Te esperamos para sumergirte en un mundo de novelas incredibles. Chapter 536 Hurricane. Shirley heard the words and looked in the direction of Qin Zhu's finger, and immediately exclaimed, "Wow, Sister Eva, what are you doing?" At this moment, Eva had opened a bucket of environmentally friendly paint and was stirring it constantly, as if she was considering where to start. Hearing Shirley's question, Eva raised the brush in her hand and invited with a smile, "I'm painting the dogs' houses, do you want to join me?" Nodding excitedly, Shirley came to a small assembled house, waiting for Eva to come and teach her. Eva quickly painted the simplest color in her hand, and then came to Shirley with a few small buckets, and asked with a smile, "Little baby, tell me, how should we paint it?" "How to paint it? Wait for me to think about it." The little girl supported her chin with both hands thoughtfully, thought for a while, and then said, "Sister Eva, let's paint this blue." Eva smiled and agreed. Anyway, it was for her to play with, so it didn't matter how to paint it. If building blocks is interesting and can attract Qin Zhu, then painting is really not within Qin Zhu's interest. Seeing the two women, one big and one small, having fun, Qin Zhu did not go over to disturb them. He took a recliner and lay down under the balcony of the villa. At the door of the villa, blowing the cool autumn breeze, drinking carefully prepared comfy tea, and tossing his big tiger, that is really a kind of enjoyment. But Qin Zhu was a little puzzled that the white tiger seemed to be a little uneasy today. He always made a low roar in his throat from time to time, as if he wanted to express something, but he couldn't say it clearly. Not only was there something wrong with the white tiger, but Da Hectors and Xiao Hectors were also a little anxious, walking back and forth at the door of the villa. Little Jerry the squirrel, even more rarely brought his wife to move things from the pine tree outside to the house. The big alligator turtle in the fountain also climbed up the shore slowly, and whispered with the two little guys. I don't know what common language they, a typical combination of old and young, can have. The uneasy atmosphere, started by the small animals, gradually began to spread in the villa. Boss, what's wrong with them? Eva also found something wrong at this time, and came over to ask with some confusion. I don't know either. Qin Zhu shook his head blankly, and muttered in confusion. It's very strange, they have never behaved like this before. Uncle, Daha and the others seem to be very scared. Shirley brought Daha and Xiaohe over from not far away, so that they would not stay with the big turtle to avoid getting wet. Qin Zhu nodded, he also felt it. Not only Daha, but even the white tiger gave him a feeling of fear. What on earth is it? Can it make the king of the forest feel scared? Ding-ling-ling ding-ling-ling. A rapid ring of the phone broke the frozen atmosphere between the few people, and also made Kinzu's heart jump. Could it be that something is going to happen? Picking up the phone, Kinzu breathed a sigh of relief. It was Chen Mu. What's wrong? Kinzu's voice was a little unhappy. Anyone who was disturbed at this time would feel a little uncomfortable. Chen Mu ignored Kinzu's tone, but gritted his teeth and said, "Boss, Yamamoto Yu is here." "What?" Kinzu stood up and said angrily. "He dares to come. What does he want to do?" Chen Mu shook his head and said in a puzzled tone, "I don't know, but looking at him, it seems that he wants to participate in the auction tonight." "Oh, did I hear it right? He dares to come to the auction?" Kinzu almost laughed out of anger. Is this guy's brain broken? Doesn't he know that he has been exposed? He dares to run towards him. It should be right. Chen Mu said affirmatively. I guess he doesn't know that his plan has been exposed, so he wants to auction the remaining 2 bluified tuna. At the time, he will not lose anything. Kinzu heard this and felt that this explanation was the most reasonable, but didn't he know that only one was auctioned today? Hearing Kinzu's doubts, Chen Mu explained with a sneer. "Boss, I think he should be confident in himself and thinks he can convince us to sell the remaining one to him." Kinzu rubbed his head. "Did he look for you?" Chen Mu nodded. "Well, he wanted to see me, but I refused." Sneering twice, Chen Mu continued. "It's really nice of him to think about it, but he can only think about it. We won't sell the best to him." Feeling Bayu's increasingly uneasy mood, Kinzu didn't have the energy to think about it, and simply said, "Okay, you can handle these things yourself. Anyway, I'll leave the restaurant matters to you." Chen Mu nodded and said with a smile, "Okay, I get it, that's it for now." Kinzu was about to hang up the phone when he suddenly heard Chen Mu say again, "By the way, boss, I heard from the forecast that there seems to be a hurricane today and tomorrow, and it may have just landed in Winthrop. You are quite close, so be prepared." "What? Hurricane?" Kinzu jumped up. "Are you kidding me? Isn't the sun in the sky? How can there be a hurricane? Can it be true?" "It seems so. If I listen to what is said on TV, it is said that the hurricane is caused by the intersection of cold currents or something." Chen Mu said uncertainly. "It should be nothing. The forecast says it is not serious." "Fuck, do you think the forecast can be trusted?" Kinzu was a little uneasy. After years of being influenced by China, he deeply believed in one truth. If the forecast says there will be rain, it may really be no rain. If the forecast says there will be light rain, it may be a thunderstorm. After saying a few words in a hurry, Kinzu hung up the phone. If it was in China, he would not care if he saw a typhoon on TV. But he lives by the sea now. If a typhoon comes, it will be a bit of a cat. If it causes a tsunami or something, Kinzu is a little panicked. Damn it, why don't we leave now and go to New York to avoid the limelight? As soon as this thought came up, Kinzu threw it out of his mind. I guess all flights are suspended now. If he drove himself and encountered a typhoon, it would be a lot of fun. It would be better to stay at home honestly. Clean, what hurricane are you talking about? Is a hurricane coming here? Eva looked at Kinzu who was a little dazed and asked quickly. Well, from what Chen Mu said, it seems that the weather station just announced it. Kinzu came back to his senses after hearing this, and quickly told Eva, "Go and check if this is true." Chapter 537 The Coming Storm. Before Eva could do anything, she saw a shabby pickup truck in the distance, speeding over like the wind. When it arrived at the door of the villa, the shabby pickup truck braked coquettishly. Old John opened the door and got out with a serious look. He hurried to Kinzu's side and looked at Kinzu with some worry. "Boss, the situation is not good. I heard that the hurricane will land in Winthrop next door, very close to us." When facing old John, Kinzu put away his panic just now, smiled and motioned him to sit down opposite, and asked, "Old John, I have no experience in this matter. In your opinion, what should we do?" Lighting up a cigarette, old John took a deep puff and said with a wry smile, "Boss, to be honest, this is the first time I have encountered such a thing. In my life, it is really the first time I have encountered a hurricane landing directly here." Kinzu was a little dumbfounded after hearing this. It turned out that this was really his bad luck. What others haven't encountered for many years, but he encountered it as soon as he arrived. Does this mean that he is unlucky? Or was it just luck? Seeing that Kinzu seemed a little unconvinced, old John explained, "Really, boss, our Boston area is located in the northeastern United States, not like the Midwest, which is a tornado corridor. It is impossible for a hurricane to land directly. Eva next to him also nodded and agreed. Yes, I have never encountered a typhoon landing directly since I was a child. The most dangerous one was just a slight impact. What happened this time? Kinzu pointed at the computer with some depression. On the laptop, it was the US Weather Bureau. The typhoon warning issued was still level 4, which is equivalent to a super hurricane, right? Old John and Eva looked at each other. How should they answer? While they were talking, the weather, which was originally clear, gradually began to become gloomy. The grey clouds were so low that they seemed to be collapsing, which made people feel depressed. Even the autumn wind, which was a little warm just now, suddenly became fierce, blowing the maple leaves at the door. The air seemed to be filled with a smell of impending storm. Forget it, let's not worry about this for now. Old John, tell me, how do you usually deal with a typhoon? Kinzu waved his hand nervously and looked at Old John, hoping that the old cowboy could give him a solution. Boss, there is a basement in your villa. Prepare some food and water and put them in, and then close the doors and windows. After a pause, Old John sighed and said, I'll drive all the cattle and sheep into the forest. How many can survive depends on their luck. Kinzu was silent when he heard this, nodded, and asked with concern, do you have enough manpower? Do you want us to go over and help? Old John looked at the sky, shook his head, and said, the rain won't fall for a while, we should be able to make it in time. When Old John drove away, Kinzu and Eva turned around and returned to the villa. Coming to the basement of the villa, looking at the space of less than 20 square meters, Kinzu frowned. Why is this place so small? Where are all of us? Eva turned on the light and looked around, feeling somewhat helpless. This basement was not small, but who could help her with so many people? Forget it, there is no other way. We can just squeeze in when the time comes. Let's get some food in first. Kinzu nodded. This was the only way now. He turned and walked out of the basement. But when he got outside, Kinzu became even more depressed. There was a lot of food, and it was all fresh ingredients. But what was the use of it? Can it be eaten? And because the two women in the family did not have the habit of eating snacks, there was really no ready-made food in the villa. Boss, I'll go buy some back. Anyway, it seems that I can't come down for a while. Dale said at the side. Kinzu thought for a while and waved his hand. Forget it, I'll go. You go and move Erica and the others down. Remember to be careful. Hearing this, Dale looked at Kinzu deeply, nodded, and said nothing more. Eva opened her mouth and wanted to say something, but was interrupted by Kinzu's wave. Call Danny and tell him to be careful. Drive the cattle into the forest and let them fend for themselves. Although he was reluctant to give up so many new cattle, there was no good way now. Facing the hurricane, the only thing he could pray for was to survive safely. Arriving at the garage, Kinzu drove out his Knight the 15th. This armor bulletproof car still gave him a sense of security. On the way, Kinzu looked at the gradually rising strong wind and the somewhat fast traffic on the road, and smiled bigly. He was really lucky. It was estimated that this group of unprepared foreigners would be in trouble. While driving, Kinzu took out his mobile phone and called Mobika. What's the matter, Clean? You missed me after not seeing me for such a while? Mobika's voice was as sweet as ever, and it seemed that she had not noticed the change in the weather outside. Where are you now? Kinzu asked nervously. Home. What's wrong? Mobika was a little confused, and then teased. Do you want to come over? My parents are not at home. Kinzu smiled bitterly and shook his head. This silly girl. Didn't you watch TV? A hurricane is coming. Let's find a place to hide quickly. What? Hurricane? Mobika exclaimed in disbelief. Hey, Clean, this joke is not funny. Mobika came back to his senses and shook his head with a chuckle. How could there be a hurricane in Boston? Silly girl, didn't you notice that the weather outside has changed? Kinzu was also helpless. He parked the car in front of the Revere supermarket and continued. You can go online and check the announcement just released by the US Meteorological Bureau not long ago. Walking into the supermarket and listening to the chaos on the other end of the phone, Kinzu said. Since you were at home, it's even better. Clean up the basement and prepare some food in it. Just hide in it when the hurricane comes. Oh my god, no, Clean, there is no food at my house. We just solved it today. Besides, my parents are not at home. Mobika's voice was a little at a loss, and Kinzu felt a little distressed. Then pack up your things and drive to the ranch. I'll buy some things in Revere and then go back. Go out now. Mobica looked at the gloomy sky outside and said fearfully, "I dare not." "Don't worry, it will be fine for a while. The hurricane won't come that soon." Kinzu comforted softly, "And you are so close to the ranch, you will be there in a few minutes." Ahem, regarding hurricanes and typhoons, I just thought that some book friends may not know what a hurricane is, so I directly wrote typhoon. It has been corrected. Chapter 538 The call that couldn't be connected. Seeing that Mobica was still hesitant, Kinzu's voice became serious. "Mobica, pack up and come here quickly. Do you want to be trapped in the villa?" Hearing this, before Mobica could speak, Onid grabbed the phone and said in a hurry, "Clean, no more talking, we'll drive over now." As soon as the voice fell, the phone was hung up with a snap. Onid looked at Mobica, who was a little overwhelmed, and sighed helplessly. Sure enough, women are still different from men. The first reaction to disaster is always to be at a loss. Let's go with those clothes. His villa must be much better than ours." Haley was packing things nearby, feeling a little uneasy. "If I had known there would be a hurricane, why would I come here to join in the fun? It's really unlucky." Not to mention the three women packing up and rushing to the villa, Kinzu is now a little too busy with the phone. Christine's caring greetings, Anna's greetings, and a lot of social celebrities' caring greetings made Kinzu very annoyed. Finally, Kinzu simply turned his phone to silent mode. "I was busy saving my life, so I didn't have time to waste time with you." The supermarket was also crowded at this moment. Kinzu, who was pushing the cart, felt that he could hardly move. However, his well-trained body allowed him to quickly break through the siege. Kinzu kept picking up useful and useless things on the cart. He went back and forth 5 or 6 times until the night the 15th was stuffed to the point where there was no more room. Kinzu closed the door unwillingly. "Hey, Clean, it seems that you are not optimistic about the situation this time." The sudden voice next to him brought Kinzu back to his senses from his own world. Turning around, it turned out to be his neighbor, Kate Stephen. Nodding at Kate, looking at his cart full of large and small bags, Kinzu said, "Why, Kate, you are here to buy things too? Of course, we must be prepared for the worst, right?" Kate smiled bitterly and pointed to the sky, with a helpless look on her face. Kinzu looked at the increasingly gloomy sky, and he felt bad. The hurricane passed by so lightly, and he didn't know how many families would be broken apart. Alas, being able to survive is the most important thing, isn't it? Kinzu patted Kate's shoulder, opened the car door and sat in. "I'm leaving first, there are still many things to deal with at the ranch." Before closing the door, Kinzu stopped, looked at Kate, and said seriously, "Good luck to you, man." Looking at the car shadow going away, Kate was a little stunned, and whispered softly, "Good luck to you, man." Night the 15th had just left Revere when a lightning bolt as thick as an arm instantly cut through the gloomy sky. The thunder that followed also made Kinzu's heart tremble, as if something bad had happened again. And with the thunder, the sky seemed to be unzipped, and the heavy rain poured down as if it was free. The strong wind that came with it also made the small trees on the roadside bend helplessly. Fortunately, night the 15th was heavy enough, and with a truckload of food, even if the wind blew, it would not have any effect for a while. So, amid the envious and jealous eyes of the small car drivers, Kinzu drove smoothly into the ranch. However, the further he got to the ranch, the more uneasy Kinzu felt, as if he had really forgotten something very important. He drove the car straight into the underground garage and saw Eva walking around anxiously. Kinzu's uneasy feeling reached its peak. As soon as he opened the car door and had no time to get out of the car, he saw Eva running over in a hurry. "Clean, hurry up, go pick up Mobica and the others." Eva looked at Kinzu breathlessly, and said anxiously, "Their car broke down on the way." "What?" Kinzu's body suddenly froze, and he quickly opened the back door and threw all the things down, and said angrily, "How could this happen? Why didn't they call me?" Eva also came to help. The two of them quickly took the things down, and Eva explained anxiously, "No one answered your phone. I called for more than 10 minutes, but no one answered. I thought you were in trouble. I was scared to death." Kinzu was stunned. It was not until this time that he remembered his mobile phone, which he had just turned off. Damn it. He cursed fiercely, and he didn't know who he was scolding. Kinzu's hands moved faster. After all, now is not the time to tangle with this. After Kinzu threw out all the things in the car, he hurriedly got in the car and started the night the 15th. "You get the things up first, I'll go see them." As soon as the voice fell, night the 15th roared out of the garage. Facing the heavy rain and the increasingly strong wind, he rushed into the rain without hesitation. Eva looked at the car behind her, a little dazed, praying silently in her heart, hoping that the few people could return safely. At this time, the rain outside was even more urgent, and the big raindrops seemed to be desperate, hitting the car body crazily. Kinzu carefully controlled the car, turned on the headlights to indicate his presence, and took out his mobile phone. Looking at the nearly 100 missed calls on it, he felt a little ashamed. He quickly found Mobika's phone number and called it. Unexpectedly, the other side of the microphone came the cold voice of the system. "Sorry, the user you dialed is temporarily unavailable. Please leave a message after the beep tone." Kinzu was a little panicked and quickly called on it again. Unexpectedly, the system prompt sound rang again. Damn, what's going on? Kinzu didn't care about anything else. He turned on the emergency lights, parked the car on the side of the road, found the number that Hale called last time and called back. Fortunately, Hale's phone was finally connected. "Hello, who are you looking for?" Hale's slightly crying voice through the microphone made Kinzu feel extremely distressed and ashamed. "I'm Keen." "Where are you now?" "I'm on the way back." Hearing Kinzu's voice, Haley on the opposite side burst into tears and sobbed, "Why did you come just now? We were scared to death, woo." Kinzu wiped the cold sweat from his head, quickly activated Night the 15th, and said hurriedly, "Haley, don't cry first. Tell me your location." "I'll be there now." Although Haley wanted to tell him the location, she was helpless because she was not familiar with the place, so she had to hand the phone to Mobeka next to her and sobbed, "Quick, Keen's phone number, tell him the location here." "Thank you for your support for being so handsome that it shocked the party central committee." Chapter 539. Haley's persistence. Mobeka answered the phone, tears could not help pouring out, choking and saying, "Whoa. Clean, where are you?" "Our car broke down." "Good, baby, I know, I'm on my way, tell me where you are now." Kinzu's gentle comfort made Mobeka's mood a little more stable. She looked through the rain curtain like a waterfall outside the window, trying hard to identify the somewhat blurry world outside. But soon she gave up, choking and saying, "I don't know, it's impossible to see outside now, the car broke down not long after we went out." Kinzu looked out, feeling a little helpless. The rain was getting heavier now, and he was almost pouring water down with a basin. "Okay, don't worry, I roughly know. What car are you driving now?" "Haley's big red Ferrari." Kinzu rolled his eyes. "Dare you drive a supercar in this weather? Turn on the hazard lights now. I'll be at your door in a minute." Mobeka heard this and quickly waved at Haley. "Quick, turn on the hazard lights." Haley quickly turned on the hazard lights of the car. In the rain that covered the sky, a few faint yellow lights lit up. Kinzu kept his phone open, parked the car in the middle of the road, and looked across. Fortunately, there were basically no cars on the roads in the United States, so Kinzu's obvious violation of the rules did not cause any accidents. After a few minutes of slow driving, Kinzu finally found Haley's eye-catching red Ferrari in front of a road dotted with pine trees through the rain. "Okay, I see you, don't move, I'll be there soon." Kinzu looked around and drove the Night the 15th directly through the roadblock in the middle, regardless of the fact that this was an interstate highway. At this time, Haley and the other two girls also discovered Kinzu's car. Seeing such a domineering scene, the three of them were originally a little panicked, but they calmed down all of a sudden. "Wow, Mobeka, your guy is really awesome." Haley saw her savior come in, and she didn't cry at all. She looked at the domineering Night the 15th with stars in her eyes. In her heart, she was secretly thinking, "Should I ask my dad to get me one to drive when I go back?" Mobeka ignored Haley. She also looked at Kinzu's car with complicated eyes. At this moment, she felt that her heart was very fulfilled and peaceful. But Kinzu was not so calm at this time. Looking at the big red Ferrari, he came to the big pine tree, which was hung by the strong wind and couldn't stand up straight. He was trembling with fear. Without thinking too much, Kinzu yelled at the phone, "Mobeka, hurry up and hold the handle, quick." Mobeka was a little stunned when she heard it, but her reaction was not slow, and she felt, "Keen told us to hold the handrail, quick." Just when the three women were at a loss and just grabbed the handrail in the car, Kinzu drove the Night the 15th and hit the ferry's butt directly. Click. Boom. Bang. Ah. 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 The three women in the car felt that the ferry seemed to be pushed forward by a huge force, and they screamed immediately in fear. Kinzu, feeling the loud noise and the violent vibration on the roof of the Night the 15th, felt a little fortunate in his heart. Fortunately, he came in time. If it was a little later, the three women would probably have to lie in the hospital. Listening to the screams and curses coming from the phone, Kinzu smiled helplessly. Well, they are all full of energy, it seems that there is no big problem. As soon as the car doors opened, bean-sized raindrops came pouring down. The clothes that were dry at first became soaked. Kinzu looked at the sturdy pine tree on his car and the slightly dented roof that was hit, and felt a little scared. Damn it, even an armored vehicle like mine was smashed into this state. If it hit a ferry, let alone going to the hospital, it would probably be sent directly to the funeral home. After complaining, Kinzu didn't bother to look at it anymore. He shivered and ran towards the ferry. When he got close, Kinzu didn't hesitate to slap the glass hard, signaling that the people could come out. Although it broke down first and then was hit, ferry is a famous brand after all. The road to style door slowly opened with Haley's operation. Although the three women in the car were not seriously injured, they still hit some bumps and bruises. For example, Haley, who was sitting in the driver's seat, hugged her chest with her hands at the moment, looking at Kinzu with shame and anger. Kinzu looked at her size, then looked at the steering wheel so close, and he felt a little pain for her. Of course, these thoughts were just a flash, and Kinzu shouted the moment the car door opened. "Hurry up, get in my car, hurry." Although Haley and the other two were a little dazed, they still subconsciously followed Kinzu's words. Without worrying about the heavy rain outside, the three women got off the ferry together and ran to the night the 15th behind. Kinzu was about to catch up, but he saw Haley, who had just run a few steps, turned around and came back. Seeing this, Kinzu thought that this woman was reluctant to part with her ferry, and hurriedly shouted, "Hurry up, don't worry about the car first." "No, Haley is still in it, I want to take her with me." Haley ignored Kinzu's pulling, cried and rushed into the car, and searched like crazy. Finally, under the seat, Haley found Heidi, who was dizzy from the fall. "Master, Heidi is scared." The little girl was a little depressed, not knowing whether she fell or was cold. "Good boy, baby, mommy is here." Haley's eyes were filled with tears. She gently kissed the poor little girl, stuffed her into her arms, and then turned and ran to the back. Kinzu was shocked. Is this her love for Heidi? Even in such a dangerous moment, she couldn't forget the little parrot. But before he finished sighing, Kinzu turned around and was dumbfounded again. Haley, who was halfway through the run, seemed to be wearing high heels. The strong wind made her steps shake and she fell directly on the road. Now, Mobeka and Donald in front stopped running. They endured the invasion of the heavy rain, squatted down, and tried to help Haley up. But people with sprained ankles can't use any strength at all, how can they be helped up so easily? Especially in such bad weather, it was good enough that he was not blown away by the strong wind. "Hurry, you get in the car first, I'll help." Kinzu ran up quickly and shouted at the two girls. There was no way, if he didn't shout, he couldn't hear what he said. Mobeka was also very obedient. He wiped the rain off his face, forced his big eyes open and said loudly, "Clean, then you take good care of her." Just as he was about to leave, he was pulled by Haley. Mobeka turned his head and saw Haley took out the little parrot from her arms and begged, "Mobeka, hurry up, help me take it." Mobeka was stunned, stretched out his hand to take the little guy, put it on his chest to protect it, and ran towards night the 15th without stopping. It was not until he saw Mobeka's back gradually going away that Haley's mouth showed a hint of a sincere smile. Chapter 540 Return to the villa. Kinzu looked at the smile on Haley's lips, and for the first time, he felt that even if this woman didn't have that charming face and that devilish figure, she would still be so charming. Of course, she is even more charming now. Seeing that Mobeka had gone far away, especially feeling that the wind was getting stronger, Kinzu did not hesitate. He bent down, stretched out his hands, and with a force, he picked Haley up horizontally. Looking at the man holding her, Haley's heart was very excited and particularly restless. People are most easily moved only in the most desperate moments. Haley is like this. Looking at the big pine tree across the roof of the night the 15th, she immediately understood why Kinzu hit her just now. Especially thinking that if Kinzu hadn't been there, the tree would have fallen down, and the three sisters would probably have lost a member, right? Thinking of this, Haley felt a little scared in her heart. In an excitement, she was blown by the strong wind a little, and she couldn't hold on anymore and fell to the ground. And at this time, it was this man again, and he picked her up again and saved herself again. Regardless of age, every woman has a dream of a prince in her heart. Now Haley feels that her dream has come true. Well, if the prince's hands can be more honest, it will be even more perfect. Feeling the changes in her body, Haley thought with a red face. Kinzu didn't know that his bad behavior had been discovered. If it weren't for the strong wind, he would have thought that this road would never be finished. Because this feeling is so damn good. Unfortunately, no matter how good the fantasy is, it is just a fantasy. No matter how far the distance is, there will be a day when it comes to the end. When Kinzu put Haley on the back seat of night the 15th, the two women in the car hurriedly came up excitedly. Seeing the three women hugging each other, Kinzu's eyes were straight. What is a see-through outfit? What is the wind tight? Shivering, Kinzu quickly opened the door and got in the car. It was already autumn. Although the temperature was still relatively high, it couldn't withstand such a strong wind and rain. Starting the car, Kinzu drove carefully along the roadblock on one side, fearing that he would be carried into the ditch by the wind if he was not careful. Fortunately, Kinzu has a good character. Well, maybe it's because of bleeding. Through the review mirror, Kinzu looked at the scarlet on its forehead and asked with some concern. Onid, did you hit your head? Are you okay? After hearing what Kinzu said, the three of them finally reacted. Mobuka quickly took out a tissue from the car, leaned over, and helped Onid wipe the blood off her head. She said with some heartache. What happened? Does it hurt? Onid touched her forehead and said in a daze. I don't feel any pain, I guess it's just a little scratch. Kinzu was relieved after hearing this, and drove his car wholeheartedly, trying to control his eyes to avoid him always looking around. The ranch was not too far from Mobuka's home. Kinzu drove slowly for more than 10 minutes and finally got off the interstate highway and onto the ranch road. When he got here, Kinzu's heart was finally at ease. He was in his own territory, and it didn't matter how he floated. The rain continued to fall outside, and the sky was even more gloomy and terrible. Looking at the rolling black clouds and the electric dragons that rolled from time to time, Eva's heart was heavy. In the living room, Shirley hid in Eva's arms and asked in a crying voice, Sister Eva, it's raining so hard outside, why hasn't Uncle come back yet? Soon, Shirley, don't worry, Uncle will be back soon. Eva stroked the little girl's head and comforted her softly. Daha and Xiaohe next to them seemed to know that the current situation was not good. They didn't continue to be naughty, but stayed quietly by the little girl's side, accompanying her to listen to the thunder outside. After a while, Dale came out of the basement, looked at the weather outside, and asked, The boss has been gone for almost half an hour, right? No news yet? Eva nodded, and said worriedly, It's been 27 minutes, and there's still no news. You stay at home, I'll go out to find him. Dale said, put on a coat, picked up the car keys and was about to go out. At this moment, there seemed to be some other sounds in the unchanging rain. The two looked at each other, and Dale ran out without saying a word. Before she ran out, she saw three graceful women wearing see-through clothes running in from the door. Mobuka, are you okay? Seeing the people come in, Eva stood up quickly. It's okay, nothing serious. Mobuka breathed a sigh of relief, sat down on the leather sofa, and didn't want to move at all. As soon as Kinzu entered the room, he saw the indecent sitting posture of several women. He wiped his wet hair, coughed twice and said, Why don't you go wash and change clothes first? When the power and water are cut off, what will you do? After Kinzu said this, the women also reacted, looked at each other, and their faces became a little red. Especially Haley, looking at Kinzu's fiery eyes, thinking of her own springlight that was looming now, she screamed and hid behind Mobuka. Ahem, you guys go wash and change clothes quickly, if you don't have any, wear Eva's first. The previous words were fine, and the women nodded in agreement. But Kinzu didn't know if his brain was twitching, and he added another sentence at the end, anyway, your figures are similar. In an instant, the eyes of several women all looked over. What do you mean by having similar figures? Kinzu's heart trembled. No, pills. Well, I'm going to take a shower first. I stink. After saying this, Kinzu fled. And the development of things was indeed as Kinzu expected. Just a few minutes after everyone took a shower, the villa fell into darkness. The power is out. With the dim light coming in through the window, Kinzu looked at the gloomy sky outside and said helplessly, It seems that a cable has been cut. I'm afraid that the electricity will not be available for a while. After hearing this, several people were silent. People who were used to electrical appliances were really not used to this kind of life without electricity. After a moment's silence, Eva on Kinzyu's left suddenly remembered something and said, "By the way, I remember hearing from old John that there seemed to be some automatic power generation equipment installed in the villa." Automatic power generation? Kinzyu was a little confused. Is it a generator or solar energy? Ahem, honey, Liu's updates are still very stable, aren't they? There has been no interruption. I get off work late, around 9 o'clock. Liu has been working very hard to continue writing. I will update for you after the National Day holiday. Chapter 541 Generator. Eva shook her head. I don't know too much. I heard it by chance when I was listening to old John introducing the villa. Kinzyu nodded, took out his mobile phone and called old John. Boss, how is it? Is everything okay over there? Old John's words were slightly tired. I'm fine here, the villa is fine, how about you? Boss, don't worry, the builder who built the house was very conscientious. The earthquake and wind resistance level of the house is very high. There is nothing wrong for the time being. Speaking of the quality of the house, old John couldn't help but feel fortunate in his heart. There are fewer and fewer such conscientious builders now. Kinzyu smiled when he heard it. What a joke, the system product, how can there be no quality assurance? Thinking of this, Kinzyu also had greater confidence in his villa. By the way, old John, I heard that the villa has an automatic power generation device, right? Yes, boss, don't you know? I remember introducing it. Old John asked with some doubts. Well, maybe I didn't hear it clearly at the time. Kinzyu smiled awkwardly, then said, Then do you know where it is? Is it solar-powered or gasoline-powered? Old John thought for a while, and said uncertainly, It should be behind that distribution room. It seems to be powered by gasoline. Kinzyu thanked him, and told old John to be careful, and then hung up the phone. Holding the phone and turning on the flashlight, Kinzyu stood up and walked towards the storage room. Seeing this, Eva hurriedly took Dale and followed. The three women behind them looked at each other, and just as they were about to follow, they saw Kinzyu turned around and whispered, Mobuka, take good care of Haley and Shirley, and don't come over. After the three nodded in response, Kinzyu walked towards the distribution room again. Opening the distribution room and bypassing a bunch of complicated wires, Kinzyu also saw a pure black gasoline generator more than 1 person tall placed in the corner. Boss, it seems that this is it. Eva said happily from behind. Yeah, Kinzyu also nodded. However, the next question came. How to use it? Just when Kinzyu and Eva were staring at each other, Dale came up and directly connected the output line of the generator to the main interface. Will this work? Kinzyu asked uncertainly. Don't worry, boss, the power of this generator is enough to drive the electrical appliances in the villa. Dale said with a smile. After Dale connected the wires, Eva went to the storage room to fetch a bucket of gasoline and poured it directly into the generator. With Dale's operation, the headlights in the villa finally lit up again. Wow, the lights are on, so bright. Shirley looked at the dazzling chandelier above her head in the living room and cheered excitedly. After Shirley's cheers ran out, the haze that suppressed everyone's hearts seemed to be dispelled a lot. Smiles returned to everyone's faces, and the violent storm outside seemed to have disappeared. Looking at the women sitting on the sofa and laughing under the gorgeous lights, Kinzyu felt a little more relaxed. Coming to the living room, Kinzyu sat down on the sofa, put his arm around Onid, and said with concern, Is the head injury okay? Onid smiled sweetly, leaned in Kinzyu's arms, and whispered, It's okay, it doesn't hurt, maybe it was hit on the seat at the beginning. Kinzyu breathed a sigh of relief when he heard it, and looked at Haley on the side, and asked with a smile, When was your ferry built, why did it break down? Hearing Kinzyu's question, Haley rolled her eyes in frustration, and after changing the position of Heidi in her arms, she muttered, That's this year's new car, who knows it will break down at the critical moment. At this point, Haley looked at Kinzyu, her eyes lit up, and asked, Clean, what model is your car? It's so cool. I want to buy one and drive it back. You want to buy the Night the 15th? Kinzyu stared at her with eyes wide open, revealing a hint of disbelief. Come on, although you were also tall, when you stand next to Night the 15th, are your wheels taller than his? Why are you looking at me like that? It's not like I can't afford it. Haley thought Kinzyu was worried that she couldn't afford it, and muttered, Although I don't have money, my dad does. When I go back, I will ask him to get me one. It's so cool. Kinzyu rolled his eyelids speechlessly. Sure enough, this is a rich second generation. I know you have money, but don't you think it doesn't match? Kinzu made a gesture of height and body shape, reminding the girl in front of him that you are too weak. What's that? I can still drive. Haley pouted, revealing a lack of confidence on her face. Kinzu saw this, and did not argue with her, but waved at the little one. When Heidi saw this, she flapped her little wings and ran into Kinzu's arms. This little heartless guy. Haley pouted a little depressed, rubbing her ankle which was still a little painful, with a look of grievance on her face. Kinzu covered his head. He was just looking for trouble. Why did he bother to talk to him when he could change the subject? So, Kinzu handed the little one over again, and got up and went to the kitchen. It was almost evening, so I should eat something, take a shower and go to bed early. Dinner in the evening was also simple. Kinzu took out the beef from the refrigerator, fried a large plate of it directly, and then mixed some fruit salad and made a soup. In this way, a simple and warm dinner was ready. After dinner, Kinzu did not stay outside for long, but brought the girls to the basement. Looking at the 12 women lying on the hospital beds, Haley covered her mouth in surprise. What on earth was going on? Eva looked at the situation in the room, pulled Haley out, and told her the cause and effect of the matter outside. Ah? Haley exclaimed, pointing at Kinzu in the basement in disbelief, and asked, "You mean, the guy who caused a shock in the police and military circles is clean?" Eva shrugged and said with a wry smile, "It seems so." Haley was speechless for a while. She thought he was just a small rancher, but she didn't expect that his assets were almost catching up with her father. At this point, Haley lost any sense of superiority in front of Kinzu. Time passed quickly, but it seemed very long. In the evening, Typhoon Seagull landed in Winthrop as scheduled. As for what impact this would have on Winthrop and the entire United States, Kinzu didn't know yet. Anyway, he clearly understood one thing, that he had to change the glass. Chapter 542. Is it a dream? Or is it a dream? Kinzu felt a little cold when he heard the sound of glass breaking outside. Damn, it's a good thing that my villa is windproof, otherwise it would have been blown away by you. However, although the house was not blown away, the people and small animals in the room were scared. Daha and Xiaohe, who were playing around just now, are now hiding in the corner of the sofa and shivering. Daha and Xiaohe, who were chasing and playing, are now nestling in their father's arms and shivering. Little Jerry and his little wife took the lead entering the basement and hid in the corner. They took out a few pine nuts from somewhere and enjoyed them leisurely. Kinzu scratched his head. It was the first time he realized that the smartest of his little guys was actually this little squirrel. He waved his hand to call all the guys over. Kinzu called all the small animals in the house into the basement, although it might be a bit crowded. Well, it was a bit crowded. Kinzu was pushed against the wall by Bayu, thinking nonchalantly. Well, it was just that Bayu didn't break for a moment. In fact, if everyone sat down, it wouldn't be too crowded. The basement was already covered with a layer of foam, and people could sit directly on it. The 12 female soldiers were placed in a corner, lying next to each other, and they didn't take up too much space. Kinzu and his companions squeezed in another corner, and Mobeka and Donid sat on Kinzu's left and right. Haley leaned against Mobeka, and her injured leg was stretched straight out like that. Now she could still feel the pain when she bent it. Eva sat next to Wanid, and Dale didn't follow, but was distributing food with a bag. Shirley held Dudu and snuggled in Kinzu's arms, and teased Dudu with something in her hand. But the little bunny didn't pay any attention to her at all, with two little ears drooping, looking listless. With the beautiful girl by his side, Kinzu really wanted to turn into a werewolf. But looking at the little girl in his arms and the female soldiers who were curiously looking at him, Kinzu suppressed his impulse and picked up his mobile phone to surf the internet and read the news. Although the wires here might have been cut, the mobile phone still had a signal to surf the internet. Looking at the posts asking for help everywhere on Twitter, Kinzu felt lucky that he had such a big house. After watching for a while, Kinzu suddenly remembered his cheese, and his heart suddenly clicked. Damn, I think I asked it to come to the pasture this morning. Isn't this a sheep walking into the tiger's mouth? Kinzu leaned back, found a comfortable position, and closed his eyes to pretend to take a nap. The vision in his mind instantly shifted to cheese. As soon as he changed his vision, Kinzu felt his body, in the sun, constantly rising and falling with the water flow. Trying hard to control his body, Kinzu cast his eyes around and carefully identified his position. Where is this? The scene in front of him made Kinzu a little dazed. The sea, it was still the same sea. But now it always gave Kinzu a strange feeling. What on earth was it? Kinzu let the warm seawater soak his body and fell into deep thought. Warm? Kinzu raised his huge tongue and looked up at the sky. A scorching sun almost blinded his eyes. Fuck, such a big sun. Kinzu was stunned. Where was he blown by the typhoon? How could there be such a big sun? After sensing it in his heart, Kinzu was even more stunned. This place was not far from his ranch. What was going on? Kinzu was puzzled. After being stunned for a long time, Kinzu came back to his senses and looked around. He was still in the sea. However, a few kilometers away from him, there was a piece of land. Is the typhoon over? Kinzu was a little confused. Swimming with his huge body, Kinzu slowly approached the land. But after swimming for less than 2 meters, Kinzu's body suddenly froze, stopped in place, and dared not move. Because, not far in front of him, a python head as big as a millstone was staring at him with big eyes like copper bells, curiously looking at him. Yes, curious. Kinzu was sure that this was definitely a curious look. But a snake, oh no, even a python. How could it have such a humane look? Fortunately, the giant python was just a little curious about Kinzu. After looking at him for a while, it lost interest, turned around, and moved its huge body to swim away. Looking at the body of the other person, which was 40 or 50 meters long, Kinzu looked down at his own body and suddenly felt ashamed. It's a pity that he thought he was huge just now, but compared with the other person, he was not even a child. When did such a big python appear on the earth? Isn't the longest only more than 10 meters? Kinzu now felt that his brain couldn't keep up with the current rhythm. The scorching sun, the sea, and the giant python. But why does it feel so unreal? While he was wondering, Kinzu felt dizzy, and when he came back to his senses, his vision was already on himself. What's going on? Kinzu opened his eyes with a confused expression. He tried to switch his vision again, but got a tired response from Cheese. Patting his head, Kinzu remembered that he had almost used up his time today. But with that came a deep doubt. Was everything just now real? Or was it just an illusion? Thinking of this, Kinzu stood up in the surprised eyes of everyone and walked upstairs. Boss, what are you doing? Dale followed him with some doubts. Looking at the heavy rain outside the window and feeling the strong wind that wanted to take everyone away, Kinzu said with embarrassment, "It's okay, I'm just taking a look." In fact, Kinzu didn't need to come up. Listening to the whistling wind, he knew the answer. It was still a storm outside, and there was no sunny day at all. But where exactly was he just now? Was it an illusion or a real existence? Kinzu wanted to rush out right now and go to the beach to see if there really was a giant python. In the puzzled eyes of Dale, Kinzu sighed, turned around and went back into the basement. Closing the door again, Dale shook her head in confusion, unable to figure out what her boss wanted to do. Not to mention Dale, even Kinzu himself couldn't figure out what he wanted to do now. Returning to the basement, Kinzu casually dealt with the doubts of several women. He sat on the floor with his back against the cold wall, his mind blank. He seemed to have thought of something, but it seemed that he had thought of nothing. The feeling of being neither dreaming nor awake continued until it was dawn. Thanks to Panyu for the reward and support. Si este escuchando esta novela en un canal distinto a Mundo Fanfic Novelas, significat lo descarga and y subir en cines fuerzos invitamos cordialmente a visitar nuestro canal. Mundo Fanfic Novelas all encontrar la versión original de esta historia y podrás explorar muchas otras novelas de diversos narradores. Te esperamos para sumergirte en un mundo de novelas incredibles. Chapter 543 Dawn. Boss, wake up. In a daze, Kinzu heard a familiar shout, which seemed to come from the distant horizon, but also seemed to be right beside his ear. He opened his somewhat dazed eyes and saw Dale's haggard face. What's wrong, Dale? As soon as he opened his mouth, Kinzu was startled by his own voice, which sounded so hoarse now. Boss, are you okay? Do you have a cold? Hearing the hoarse voice of his boss, Dale became a little anxious. What? Kin has a cold. Eva, who had just walked in, was also startled when she heard it and ran over quickly. It's okay, maybe it's thirsty. Kinzu smacked his dry lips and stood up. He moved his sore limbs, turned his head left and right, and listened to the popping sound of his bones. Kinzu showed an expression of enjoyment. Then hurry up and go up, we've prepared the meal. Eva came over and supported Kinzu, as if she was afraid that he would fall. Dale rolled her eyes speechlessly beside her, not knowing how to say good things to her sister. Kinzu was also a little embarrassed. He was not used to being supported by others to walk. Wei Wei struggled to get rid of Eva's support, looked at her somewhat lost eyes, and took her in his arms again and walked outside. After leaving the basement, Kinzu found that the typhoon that had been raging all night had almost subsided. Although it was still raining outside, it was much smaller than yesterday. And the wind had become much smaller. Now it was only about level 4 or 5 at most. Although it was still blowing, it was no longer capable of hurting people. However, the electricity in the villa still did not come. Standing in the living room, you could still vaguely hear the sound of the generator working busily. The living room of the villa had been cleaned up by several women at this moment, and all the broken glass and rotten leaves had been cleared out. Some furniture that had been attacked by wind and rain were also cleaned, and the sofa covers were replaced with new ones. The wool carpet, sofa cushions, fabric curtains and some small things that had been put away were also put back. With a hoarse voice, Kinzu looked at the busy figures of the women and joked, "How did you finish it so quickly? Aren't you afraid of another typhoon?" It would have been better if he didn't speak. When Kinzu spoke, several people were immediately frightened. Even the little girl who was wolfing down the milk raised her head. After drinking the milk in one gulp, the little girl wiped the corner of her mouth and ran over with small steps. "Uncle, why did you talk differently? Is your throat uncomfortable?" Seeing the little girl's serious look, Kinzu smiled and pinched her little face, and replied, "Uncle didn't sleep well. He will be fine after a rest." "Really?" The little girl blinked her big eyes in confusion. She felt a little strange in her heart. Uncle got up so late, how could he not sleep well? Kinzu didn't know what the little girl was thinking, so he smiled and agreed, and nodded to Mobika and Donit, who were concerned about him, indicating that he was fine. The two girls breathed a sigh of relief, and after confirming that Kinzu was fine, they continued to clean up the room. In such a big villa, they only cleared out a living room. Kinzu looked at the backs of the two girls, nodded to Haley, who was sitting on the sofa next to him, and asked with concern, "How is it? Does your foot still hurt?" Haley was a little bored and put one foot on the coffee table, and said depressedly, "It doesn't hurt much, but I just can't walk. If this goes on, you might as well kill me." "Don't worry, the ligament is sprained, it's really serious, let's rest for a few days first." After saying that, he touched his somewhat empty stomach, nodded to Haley, and came to the restaurant again with the little girl in his arms. "Well, Uncle, I've eaten, you can eat slowly." The little girl sat in Kinzu's arms, biting her white and tender little finger in her mouth, looking like she was savoring the food, which made Kinzu laugh and cry. "Okay, Uncle knows you've eaten, so eat a little more with Uncle, okay? A little more?" The little girl hesitated. Kinzu nodded affirmatively, picked up a poached egg and placed it in front of the little girl. Looking at the golden poached egg in front of her and smelling the bursts of fragrance, Shirley's big eyes gradually narrowed into a slit. "Well, then eat a little more, this is not what I want to eat, it's Uncle who asked me to. If I get fat, I'll ask my mother to beat Uncle." As she said that, the little girl raised her fork and picked up the poached egg, without cutting it, and ate it directly. No way." Kinzu was a little dumbfounded. Kristen asked the little girl to lose weight. "Well, if I raise the little girl into a little fat girl, will Kristen kill me?" Kinzu had just finished breakfast, and when he was looking for his phone, he found that it was out of battery. He found a charger and plugged it in. As soon as he turned on his phone, before he could respond, a call came in. As the saying goes, if you mention the devil will appear. He was just talking about Christine, and now she called. "Oh, God, you finally answered the phone. If you didn't answer the phone, I would have driven over." Christine's tone of complaint and concern warmed Kinzu's heart. "I'm fine here, no big problem, just a few broken glass pieces, just replace them." Hearing Kinzu's hoarse voice, Christine was startled, exclaimed, and asked quickly, "Clean, what's wrong with your throat? Did you catch a cold?" "Nothing, maybe I caught a cold." Kinzu coughed twice and asked, "Is there any impact on your side?" "Well, it's just raining heavily, and it's still raining now." After a pause, Christine continued, "Okay, I won't say more to you, where's Shirley?" Kinzu waved to the little girl and handed the phone over with a smile. Hearing that it was her mother's call, Shirley couldn't wait, so when she saw Kinzu waving, she immediately ran over. "Mom, Sister Eva's fried eggs are delicious today, and Uncle let me eat 2 more. Kinzu was sweating as he listened to it. "Little girl, you just sold me out like this." Sure enough, after chatting with the little girl in a gentle voice, Christine complained to Kinzu. Clean, I also specifically told Eva to pay attention to the little girl's diet. It's not that I don't want her to eat, but she can't eat too much, Kristen said earnestly. I'm doing this for the little girl's own good. What if she becomes a little fat girl in the future? Kinzu was a little embarrassed. How old is she? She's already paying attention to this. But there was nothing he could do. After all, she was someone else's daughter. He had to agree. Well, okay, I will pay attention next time and not let her eat too much. Chapter 544 Losses and Insurance. Kinzu shrugged his shoulders, hugged the little girl next to him, pinched her little face and shook her. Did you hear that? Mom said I won't let you eat more, so you can tell tales. Shirley's face turned bitter when she heard that. She smacked her lips and looked at Kinzu pitifully. Uncle, I won't tell Mom anymore. Let's go eat something delicious, okay? Just as the two were laughing and joking here, a car sound came from outside the door. God bless, this damn hurricane is finally over. Old John took off his cowboy hat and sat down on the sofa opposite Kinzu. Looking at Old John's tired face, Kinzu frowned and said, Old John, I tell you to take care of yourself too. Just let them do whatever they need to do. Old John smiled and waved his hand. He felt a little warm in his heart, but still smiled and said, It's nothing, boss. It hasn't come to that. Besides, I can't stay at home. But boss, why did your throat become like this? Kinzu shook his head with a wry smile and said in a hoarse voice, Maybe I caught a cold, it's nothing serious. Seeing that Old John wanted to say something, Kinzu waved his hand and asked, Are the cattle and sheep in the ranch okay? How much was lost? Speaking of this, the smile on Old John's face dissipated a lot, and he said in a heavy tone, The situation is not very optimistic. Ryan and the others are counting. I took a rough look and there are quite a few injured, and there may be more missing. Kinzu sighed. He had expected all this a long time ago, so he didn't react too much. Instead, Old John seemed more distressed than Kinzu. The cowshed and other things are basically scrapped. The stables are pretty good, with only a few collapsed. The dairy farm is almost the same, and they all need major repairs. Repair them. I'll contact Ernst and repair all the necessary ones first. The more Kinzu talked about it, the more distressed he felt. Damn it, it seems that his wallet has been empty again after only a few days. Boss, why don't you wait for the state and the insurance company to come and take a look? Old John asked in some surprise. Wait for them. Kinzu touched his chin. Why wait for them? Is there any compensation? Old John nodded. Of course, our ranch has bought insurance, and the state will also compensate for the losses caused by natural disasters. Kinzu looked at Old John in silence. Is this guy kidding? His ranch also bought this kind of insurance. Why didn't he know about it? Seeing that Kinzu didn't believe it, Old John shrugged. Boss, you can consult Mr. David about these. He was responsible for all these in the beginning. Speaking of David, Kinzu suddenly remembered that he seemed to have received a call from him yesterday. On the phone, this guy told me not to worry about the ranch and just hide myself. I was busy at the time and didn't ask in detail. I said a few words in a hurry and hung up the phone. Kinzu took out his mobile phone and was about to call David when he heard the sound of a car coming from the door again. Mr. David, Mr. Jefferson, why are you here? Eva's voice made Kinzu stunned, and the phone in his hand stopped involuntarily. David got out of the car with Jefferson, looked at Eva in front of him, and asked hurriedly, Eva, are you all okay? Where is Clean? Hi, David, why are you here? Kinzu walked out, nodded at Jefferson, and then looked at David in surprise. It was only about 10 o'clock in the morning. Most of the flights in Boston were grounded, and it would take at least more than 3 hours to get here from New York. In other words, this guy had to leave New York at 6 in the morning. David saw Kinzu coming out, took 2 steps forward and gave Kinzu a bear hug. Oh, God, Clean, I'm so glad you're okay. Kinzu was a little confused by David's sudden enthusiasm. He had only known him for a short time, and he didn't expect this guy to care about him so much. Raising his hands, Kinzu said hoarsely, Hey, man, thank you for your concern, but I want to make it clear that I'm not gay. Hearing this, David pushed Kinzu away, slapped himself a few times, and laughed and scolded. Fuck, I'm not gay either. After scolding, David finally reacted and looked at Kinzu in surprise. Man, how did you do this? Kinzu shrugged. Maybe I caught a cold. Let's not talk about this, let's talk about it first. He led David and the others into the villa, motioned for them to sit anywhere, and Kinzu personally went to make a few cups of coffee and brought them over. Putting the coffee on the coffee table, Kinzu looked at the villa which was leaking everywhere, and said with a smile, "Don't be disgusted, now I can only entertain you in this shabby place." David looked around and nodded. "Well, the construction quality is still very good, just replace the glass and other things." "Yeah," Jefferson nodded, and joked with a smile. "But the money for replacing the glass is probably enough for me to buy another house." Looking at the two guys with heartless looks, Kinzu said depressedly, "Please, I'm a disaster victim now, can you please have some sympathy?" David shrugged, ignored Kinzu's complaints, took out a few documents from his backpack, and said with a smile, "Clean, you can't be considered a disaster victim. I think the insurance company that insures your ranch will become a disaster victim." "Huh. There is really insurance?" Kinzu took the documents and looked at David with some surprise. "Of course, boss, not only is there insurance, but the insured items are very comprehensive and the insured amount is also very large." At David's signal, Jefferson took over the conversation and introduced the ranch insurance situation to Kinzu. In order to prevent accidents, Mr. David bought several insurance policies for Tycoon Manor from a listed insurance company in New York. The content of the insurance not only covers the fishery and ranch, any non-human losses suffered under any circumstances, but also includes the life and financial security of the villa and the staff in the manor. After Jefferson finished his introduction, Kinzu opened his mouth in astonishment and asked in disbelief, "Such an outrageous insurance, will there be a company to undertake it?" Jefferson and David looked at each other and laughed at the same time. Jefferson teased, "Boss, you have to know that this is America, there is no problem that Franklin can't solve." "But aren't they afraid of losing their lives? If there is a small accident, they will be finished." Kinzu still shook his head in disbelief. Chapter 545 Someone from the state arrives. "Boss, everything in this world is risky, isn't it?" Jefferson smiled and continued, "What's more, the insurance industry itself is an industry with huge profits and risks. As long as there is enough premium, there is no guarantee they dare not take." David nodded and agreed, "That's right. You know, they dare to insure even a celebrity's leg, not to mention this kind of insurance policy that is obviously guaranteed to make money. Sure profit." Kinzu rolled his eyes when he heard this. "I guess they will lose a lot this time." After saying this, Kinzu cast his eyes on the documents in his hand and looked through them carefully. It's true that the insurance is quite comprehensive, including the newly built cattle shed and dairy factory. "Huh. When did you buy insurance? Why is there even this?" Kinzu looked at the two of them in confusion. He hadn't paid their premiums. Seeing Kinzu's confusion, David smiled and said, "Clean, Mr. Butt has taught us about these premiums in advance. $2 million are used for premiums every year." "Oh," Kinzu nodded, and then he felt relieved. Thinking of the mysterious old man Bud, he asked, "Has Mr. Butt contacted you? Did he say when he would come back?" David shook his head. "He did contact you, but he didn't say when he would come back. Mr. Butt said he would travel around the world and told you not to worry about him." Although there were a lot of documents, Kinzu only took a few minutes to read them. He put the documents back on the table and looked at Jefferson. "When will the insurance company and the state send people? They won't let me live in this leaky house all the time, right?" Jefferson looked at the time and smiled and said, "It will probably be in the afternoon. They must deal with those small heads first." Just as Jefferson said, in the afternoon, Kinzu and his friends had just finished a simple lunch, and the ranch welcomed the inspection team sent by the state government and the head of an insurance company in New York City. "Mr. Clean, Governor Theodore is in Winthrop now, inspecting the victims. He asked me to apologize to you and come over as soon as he is done." The middle-aged white man in uniform, who was the leader, looked at the young Chinese in front of him with some curiosity, wondering what the relationship between him and Governor Theodore was. Kinzu shook hands with him and said with a smile, "Mr. Governor is so polite. May I know your name?" The middle-aged white man withdrew his hand and introduced himself, "Mr. Clean, you can call me Woods. Let's take a look around first." Kinzu nodded, called David Jefferson over, and called Ryan and old John. The group of people took a car to stroll around the ranch. You don't know until you stroll around. Once you stroll around, you will be shocked. Because the newly dug river channel is already full of water, and it is about to overflow. Fortunately, he hit full sight and dug a river channel in the ranch, which prevented the ranch from being flooded. You know, his ranch is not a high to low terrain. The presence of a large lake there means that the terrain there is actually relatively low. Mr. Clean, it's really fortunate that you dug a drainage ditch in your ranch. Did you foresee the hurricane early in the morning? Woods looked at the winding river and was full of surprise. Because this hurricane came very suddenly, even the US Weather Bureau only detected some unusual things a few hours before the hurricane hit. Could it be that this Chinese in front of him can foresee the future? Qinzu touched his nose and said awkwardly, "Well, how can I have that ability? This is mainly because I want to raise some fish, but it's too troublesome to change the water every day, so I just opened a river to pass through the villa." Including Woods, everyone looked at Qinzu with an expression of looking at a monster. Is this the life of rich people? After a round, Woods took a lot of photos with the company of Old John, and then went back. As for the government compensation, it still needs to wait for the approval from above, and Qinzu obviously does not need the government resettlement. So Woods left very cool and relaxed. However, this made the person in charge of the insurance company suffer. Sitting on the sofa in the living room, Qinzu looked at the embarrassed white people opposite him and asked lightly, "Are you from Carl Insurance Company? How do you plan to compensate for this loss?" The white man in the lead coughed twice, took out 2 documents from his bag, and said bigly, "Mr. Clean, these are the compensation plans we have made after discussing just now. Please take a look first." Qinzu took the documents and looked through them carefully. After all, this is related to his wallet. It must be said that Qinzu seemed very satisfied with the compensation plan they made. First of all, for the maintenance costs of these buildings, the plan they gave was full compensation. As for the cattle and sheep in the ranch, they would compensate about 10% higher than the market price. After reading for a while, Qinzu's expression became much more relaxed. Overall, this compensation plan is still very good. Qinzu just looked at their assessed price for the fishery and shook his head. Do you think the fishery is worth that little money? After a hurricane, the biggest loss is the fishery. The other party was stunned for a moment. He thought that the compensation plan he gave was very reasonable. After compensating Qinzu, their company would also file for bankruptcy. Why was he still not satisfied? Seeing that the other party was stunned, Qinzu took out the receipts for the previous 2 fish sales and said with a smile, "I caught fish twice and sold it for more than 3 million. In addition, the fishing boat also needs to be overhauled due to the hurricane. Your compensation for the fishery is only 10 million? The middle-aged white man was a little stunned. He took the receipt and looked at it again, and finally shook his head bigly. "Mr. Clean, we need to go back and discuss this. After all, these are all unknowns. No one knows if there are still fish in the fishery." Qinzu frowned. What the other party said made sense. He really couldn't refute it, so he said, "In this case, then you go back and discuss it, and give me a plan as soon as possible." Nodding, the middle-aged white man stood up and said hello to a few people, and then left the villa with a group of people. After everyone left, Qinzu handed the document to David next to him. After he finished reading it, he smiled and asked, "David, what do you think?" Shaking the document, David nodded slightly. "Boss, this price is very good. You know, the total value of the ranch is only about 200 to 300 million. If they are willing to pay half, they will probably go bankrupt." Qinzu smacked his lips with some regret, and said with a smile, "I know that too, but this opportunity is rare. I'll get as much as I can. Who lets these insurance companies eat people without spitting out bones?" Thank you Tycoon for the 388 book coins reward. Chapter 546 Mobica's Villa. David and Jefferson did not stay at the ranch for long. After confirming Qinzu's safety, the two drove back to New York. After all, the hurricane had just passed through, and no one knew whether it would come back. After the two left, Qinzu returned to the living room, lying on the sofa, closing his eyes and meditating. To outsiders, Qinzu was just thinking about something, but no one knew that his vision had now shifted to Cheese. What disappointed Qinzu was that Cheese was now staying well on the ranch beach, with a gloomy sky above his head, no big sun, no giant python, and last night's experience seemed like a dream. Raising his body, Qinzu looked around. This was indeed the sea area of the ranch, and it was not far from the pier. Forget it, just treat it as a dream. Qinzu comforted himself in this way. Shaking his big head, Qinzu quickly jumped twice and plunged into the sea again. He wanted to see how many sea fish would be left in his fishery after the hurricane. After circling the surrounding sea for a while, Qinzu's brows were getting more and more furrowed. The situation was worse than he had imagined. He had been circling the offshore waters for most of the day, and he only encountered 2 or 3 schools of fish, and they were mainly small sea fish. There were not many major economic fish such as cod and herring left. Moreover, he had hardly found any large fish in the shallow sea. However, the coral reefs on the seabed were not affected at all, and the colorful coral fish in them seemed to be accustomed to this scene. After going deeper into the sea for a distance, Kinzu's mood improved a lot. The situation here was much better than that in the shallow sea. Although the schools of fish could not be compared with the past, Kinzu could still encounter a lot of large and small schools of fish. There were even a lot of large sea fish such as blue marlin and swordfish, which seemed to have just come from afar. After circling the seabed for a long time, Kinzu turned around and returned to the ranch. Retracting his thoughts, Kinzu opened his eyes, and 2 big eyes suddenly appeared in front of him. Little girl, what are you doing? Kinzu was startled, and when he came to his senses, he found that it was Shirley, the little girl, who was looking at him curiously. Uncle, are you very sleepy? Why don't you go to bed? The little girl just looked at Kinzu for a long time, and found that her uncle had been closing his eyes, so she thought he wanted to sleep. After knocking on the little girl's head, Kinzu smiled and said, Uncle is not sleepy, he is just thinking about something. By the way, where is your sister Eva? Before the little girl spoke, Eva's voice came from the side. Clean, do you want to accompany Mobica back to see her family? The situation at her home should not be optimistic. Kinzu turned around and saw that Mobica and Donit had already packed their things, so he nodded. Well, let's go, Mobica and I will go together. Onid, you stay here. Onid looked at Mobica and saw that she nodded, so she put her things back. Then let's go and take a look together. By the way, Haley, your ferry should also be towed away quickly. After Haley nodded in agreement, Kinzu drove his Knive the 15th and took Mobica to her ranch. Before they arrived at the ranch, Mobica received a call from Joseph, saying that they had arrived in Boston and would be back soon. On the phone, the family greeted each other with some lingering fear, and did not say anything about their daughter taking refuge at Kinzu's house. After hanging up the phone, Kinzu's car just arrived in front of Mobica's villa. Looking at everything in front of him, Mobica's phone fell into the car with a pop. Oh, my God, how could this happen? Holding his head, Mobica looked at the ruins in front of him with some disbelief. Turning his head, he looked at Kinzu eagerly and asked expectantly, Clean, did we go to the wrong place? Kinzu was a little silent. He wanted to say yes, we went to the wrong place, and then turn around and go back. But the reality is that both he and Mobica knew that this was just an excuse. Perhaps it was because Mobica's house was a bit old, and unfortunately it was hit by the hurricane. What was in front of him could not be called a ruin, but it was not far from a ruin. The roof was blown away, and a lot of the walls collapsed, not to mention the windows. The small garden in the yard, which was originally very beautiful, became muddy and full of debris. Clean, hurry up, let's go to the stable. As if thinking of something, Mobica opened the car door and ran down, stepping on the muddy dirt road and running to the side of the ranch. Kinzu did not hesitate and quickly followed. After a while, Kinzu saw Mobica in front of a ruin. She was walking around a ruin, desperately looking for something. Baby, don't get excited, Kinzu hugged Mobica, who was a little out of control, and comforted her softly. It has already happened, and it's useless for you to get excited. Let's see how to deal with it. Being hugged by Kinzu, Mobica could no longer hold on, turned around and lay on Kinzu's shoulder and burst into tears. After crying for a long time, Mobica stopped crying. She looked at the stable in front of her with tears in her eyes and choked up. It's all my fault. Why didn't I think of them? They are my father's hard work for so many years. Kinzu touched his nose. He remembered that when he came to buy horses, he also saw several horses of Joseph. They were indeed very good. I just don't know if they were crushed underneath or taken away by the hurricane. Thinking of this, Kinzu let go of Mobica, walked around the collapsed stable, and observed it carefully. After watching for a while, Kinzu's expression relaxed a little, and he came to Mobica and said, Baby, things are not that bad, there are no horses in the stable, maybe they ran away in the chaos, and they may come back in a few days. Really? Mobica looked at Kinzu with some surprise. Kinzu nodded, yes, haven't you heard of a phrase, an old horse knows the way? Of course, as to whether it is true or not, he is not sure in his heart, but now, he still has to comfort Mobica first. Just as the two were talking, there was a sound of a car from the villa. The two turned around and saw a silver white Ford pickup truck appeared at the door of the villa. Joseph is back, let's go first. Mobuka's voice was a little low. Kinzu nodded, said nothing, and followed Mobuka to the door of the villa. Chapter 547 Renovation of the villa. Arriving at the door, Kinzu found that the situation was better than expected. Except for little Jack, who looked silly and looked at the ruined home, Joseph and his wife were not emotional. Seeing Kinzu come in, Joseph rarely handed him a cigarette. After lighting it, he leaned on his pickup truck with a lonely look. Seeing that Joseph was just smoking and had no intention of speaking, Kinzu felt that the atmosphere was a bit depressing, so he comforted him. Joseph, don't be too sad. I have contacted the engineering team to come and rebuild a new one. Huh. As if he had come back to his senses from some emotion, Joseph laughed and said, Clean, don't worry. Since I knew the hurricane was coming, I have anticipated everything today. After taking 2 big puffs of the cigarette, Joseph blew out a smoke ring fiercely and said with a smile, This house has been around for a few years. I have always wanted to renovate it, but I have never had the time. This is a good opportunity. But, Joseph, your horses are gone now. Mobuka whispered beside him. Joseph's hands trembled, and he almost dropped the cigarette. He opened his mouth, wanting to say something, but he didn't. After a long while, he smiled. It's nothing, it's gone, maybe this is fate. Looking at Mobuka, Joseph smiled with some relief. As long as you're okay, nothing else matters. The more Mobuka listened, the more her nose soured. She knew how much Joseph loved those horses, but she didn't expect him to say that. After smoking a cigarette, Joseph put out the cigarette butt fiercely, stepped on the muddy ground, and walked into the ruins. After looking around and taking a lot of photos with his mobile phone, he walked out again. Let's go to Boston and live there for a while, and then build a new house after the situation here is resolved. After saying that, he looked at Mobuka, then looked at Kinzu, and said with a smile, Clean, let Mobuka stay at your place for a few days first, and come back after the situation here is resolved. Of course, no problem, Joseph, I still have an idle villa on my ranch, why don't you go and live there for a while? Kinzu touched his nose and suggested. Joseph shook his head and said with a smile, It's okay, I have a few friends in Boston, let's go and stay with them for a few days. Besides, we still have to deal with insurance matters. You know, we all have paid for insurance. Kinzu heard this and said nothing. He stared blankly at Joseph's car disappearing in front of him, still a little dazed. He originally thought that seeing his home become like this, Joseph would be furious, at least his emotions would be a little out of control. But reality gave him a completely different answer. These Americans, facing all this, did not react much. Perhaps, as he said, these are all insured, and he can't lose anything. Back at the villa, Ernst had arrived. Seeing Kinzu come in, he stood up and looked at Kinzu with a face full of shame. Mr. Clean, we are very sorry for all this. We will strictly cooperate with your inspection of our company's construction quality. Kinzu waved his hand, put aside the thoughts in his mind, looked at the somewhat nervous Ernst, and said with a smile, It's not your fault. The power of the hurricane cannot be stopped by human power. I just want to know when the renovation will be completed. Ernst finally breathed a sigh of relief when he heard this. Although everyone knew that the cause of this time was the hurricane, the impact on their company was also great. What Ernst feared most now is that Kinzu would be dissatisfied with the quality of their project. Now that he saw Kinzu was so easy to talk to, he patted his chest and assured, Clean, please rest assured, we will definitely complete the project in at most half a month. Kinzu nodded slightly. It was only half a month, and he was still very satisfied. Okay, in that case, then I'll trouble you. I hope you can start work in time after the hurricane is over. After sending Ernst away, Kinzu always felt that he had forgotten something, until he felt the cold wind blowing in from outside from time to time. He slapped his thigh. Damn it, why did he forget to ask Ernst to install all the glass in his villa? How could he sleep at night without glass in the windows? So Kinzu quickly took out his mobile phone and called Ernst again. After telling the matter, Ernst, who had already walked to the gate to the ranch, quickly turned the car around and turned back again. After personally writing down all the indicators of the windows of Kinzu's villa in a small notebook, Ernst turned to look at Kinzu and promised, Mr. Clean, I will prepare it now, and I will definitely replace the glass for you before tonight. Kinzu patted the guy on the shoulder with satisfaction, and instructed, You must remember that price is not a problem. The glass must be the best for me, and it must not be broken by the wind at any time. Ernst's face was a little embarrassed, but he still promised. Mr. Clean, don't worry, this time we will all use the latest bulletproof glass, and this kind of thing will never happen again. After seeing Ernst off, Kinzu finally breathed a sigh of relief. Although the hurricane has passed temporarily, the impacted cause cannot be recovered in a short time. Ernst's efficiency is indeed good. After the few people had just finished a simple lunch, he brought a small engineering team and drove several large and small pickup trucks into the ranch. After a busy time, before dark, the villa finally returned to its appearance before the hurricane. As for the cowboy's villa, Kinzu did not fall behind and ordered Ernst to install it as well. This also made the cowboys who were now working hard to find the lost cattle and sheep feel even more guilty. Old John rode on Sandra, shouting and directing the cowboys to look for their targets in the woods. Everyone, cheer up quickly. Such a good boss is really not that easy to find now. We can't let the boss down. The cowboys responded without hesitation, and they galloped in the rain like crazy, searching for hundreds of lost cattle and sheep in every corner of the ranch. Although the hurricane had passed, the rain showed no sign of stopping. Especially at night, the rain became more and more rapid. Kinzu was a little worried in the villa. Could the hurricane come again? Although he was worried, Kinzu had no choice but to turn on the computer and enter the official website of the US Weather Bureau. Thanks to the support of Langzi GA, I finally managed to survive the day. It was my friend's birthday last night, and several old friends got together. As a result, I got drunk and felt uncomfortable all day. Chapter 548 Bad news. The rain outside the window was falling non-stop, but it was much better than yesterday. Kinzu got up early in the morning and was frightened by the news on TV. Just as old John said, hurricanes usually don't hit Boston. So after the hurricane came ashore, it only visited Winthrop and rushed to the neighboring city. Even so, Winthrop was also submerged in a vast ocean. Governor Theodore had formally submitted an application to Congress this morning, declaring Massachusetts a disaster area. God bless, the hurricane didn't land in Revere. Eva patted her chest, with a look of fear on her face. Kinzu was sitting under the porch, holding Shirley and teasing the white tiger. Hearing this, he smiled and said, "Indeed, if it landed directly in Revere, none of us would be able to escape." As he was talking, the phone rang, and Chenmu's somewhat exasperated voice came over. "Boss, something happened. The bluefin tuna is gone." "What's gone?" Kinzu was a little confused for a moment. The bluefin tuna, the biggest one, disappeared last night. Chenmu rubbed his hair frantically, staring at the trembling security manager in front of him with anger. "How could it be? Where did you put it?" Kinzu was a little stunned when he heard it. Chenmu waved his hand, signaling the security manager in front of him to leave, and leaned back in the boss chair, saying with some annoyance, "I put the bluefin tuna in the restaurant for display. It was fine, but who knew that in the morning I found that the security guard who was guarding it fainted beside it, and the bluefin tuna disappeared. So? It was stolen?" Kinzu was a little amused when he heard it. "It's not possible, right? Even a fish was stolen?" Chenmu rubbed his head and said uncertainly, "It should be. The second bluefin tuna was just auctioned last night. The price was raised again, and it sold for more than $7 million US. I suspect someone was tempted. Perhaps because there were too many bad news recently, Kinzu did not have any emotional fluctuations when he heard that such a fish worth 7 or 8 million was lost." Leaning back on the recliner indifferently, Kinzu rubbed the little girl's pigtails and asked casually, "Who do you think did it?" "Islanders," Chenmu said decisively. "What? Islanders?" Kinzu's tone suddenly became more serious, and his hand that was stretched out in the air also stopped there. "I just suspected it." Chenmu smiled a little embarrassedly, and continued, "However, I have just investigated it. The person who auctioned off the second day's bluefin tuna yesterday was the person they secretly found." At this point, Chenmu's tone was a little complicated. It stands to reason that the fish was bought by someone at a high price, so he should be happy. But when he thought that both bluefin tuna were in the hands of the Japanese, and now the last one was gone, Chenmu felt a rage in his heart that he wanted to vent. "So, the two bluefin tuna are in their hands now?" Kinzu's tone became a little bad. "Yeah," Chenmu nodded and assured, "I can be sure of that." "Hey." Kinzu sneered twice and touched his chin with his hand. "These little devils love to play this trick. It seems that they're right." "Boss, what should we do now?" Chenmu asked uncertainly. "Should we call the police?" Kinzu thought about it, shook his head, and said, "There is no evidence, and there is no police. Don't call the police for now. Let me think about it first. Chen Mu nodded, said nothing more, hung up the phone and threw it on the table, closed his eyes and began to think about what happened in the past 2 days. At yesterday's auction, he thought that because of the hurricane, few big bosses would come. But what he didn't expect was that not only did everyone come, but even more people came, and the whole restaurant was in chaos. The final auction even sold for a record high price. A bluefin tuna weighing about 600 kilograms was sold at a high price of $7 million. But he didn't wait for long to be happy. He heard such bad news early in the morning. He was so depressed that he almost committed suicide. Dong dong dong, a hesitant knock on the door sounded. Chen Mu came back to his senses, rubbed his temples, and shouted, "Come in." As the voice fell, the black security captain pushed the door and walked in, reporting in a low voice, "Mr. Chen, the security guard is awake." "Where is he?" "Take me there." Chen Mu stood up suddenly. After seeing the confused black security guard, Chen Mu was a little disappointed. He couldn't ask anything, not even a little useful information. Chen Mu, who was already in a depressed mood, almost couldn't help but curse. Finally, after thinking about it, looking at the immature black security guard in front of him, he still held back the intention to swear, and walked to the office alone in depression. After hanging up the phone, Qin Zhu didn't think much about it. Instead, he stayed with the little girl and played with the white tiger and the 2 little tigers for a while before he got up and walked into the room. Sitting in the study room that had been replaced with bulletproof glass, Qin Zhu leaned back, closed his eyes and began to think. If, as Chen Mu said, the incident was done by those islanders, then he really spent half a year advertising for others. However, although he said it was nice to let him handle this matter, he really had no experience in how to handle it. Picking up the phone, Qin Zhu called Douglas to see if he could get a way out of him. After listening to Qin Zhu's introduction, Douglas hesitated for a while, pulled the car over to the side, and then asked, "Qin, are you short of money? If you're short of money, just say it directly. 1 or 200 million is not that much, but I can still take out tens of millions." Hearing this, Qin Zhu couldn't help but have a few black lines on his head. Damn, why do I feel that I have less and less common language with these guys? Come to think of it, when have these young masters ever been short of money? Earning a few $1 million doesn't seem to attract much of her attention. Doug, I'm serious. Please keep an eye on the customs records at the airport during this period to see if the bluefin tuna has been shipped out. What can I say about you? Doug's voice was full of helplessness. Why don't you stay in a big city? Why do you have to run to that remote place? You almost got blown away by the wind this time. Ahem. Qin Zhu coughed twice, then smiled and said, "What remote place? I'm only an hour away from Boston." Besides, Qin Zhu muttered unwillingly, didn't the hurricane turn in the end? This shows that the feng shui here is good. Chapter 549. Start to gather people. Okay, Douglas waved his hand helplessly, and said with a wry smile, "I know about this, I will help you keep an eye on it." Qin Zhu heard this and then hung up the phone contentedly. As long as it can be confirmed that the bluefin tuna is not shipped abroad by air, there will be no problem. After all, if it is shipped by sea, the road to the island country is right in the hurricane zone. As long as they don't want to die, they won't leave now. But now I still lack a skilled person. Qin Zhu sighed, there are really not many people you can use. Oh, no, it should be said that except for Dale, no one can be used. Touching his nose, Qin Zhu realized that he had been here for 2 months, and it seemed that he had failed a little. No, this won't work. At the very least, there must be someone who can protect his life safety, otherwise in this country where guns are legal, it is really a bit insecure. As for manpower, Qin Zhu already has a goal in mind. Aren't the 12 female soldiers upstairs the best choice? Why did you bring them here in the first place? That was because Qin Zhu found that all animals that he had transformed with the spirit liquid were very obedient to him. Even if they were not kept as pets and were not restricted by the pet system, they were very friendly to him. It was for this reason that Qin Zhu decided to attack these female soldiers. Otherwise, how could he be so stupid as to show off his good things? The principle of not showing off wealth is known to even a 3-year-old child. After all, he is a college student, so how could he not be on guard? Especially in the United States, where he was unfamiliar with the place and the anti-Chinese sentiment was relatively serious. If he was not careful, he might really be sliced into pieces. Retracting his thoughts, Qin Zhu opened the system and exchanged 24 spirit liquids at once. Looking at the green water droplets in his hand, Kinzu took a cup and put two in first. After hesitating for a while, Kinzu put away the rest and came out with the cup. Dale was indeed a woman who had been a special forces soldier. As soon as Kinzu came out, she found something wrong. Without disturbing others, Dale followed quietly and asked in a low voice, "Boss, what's wrong?" Kinzu, who was thinking about something, was startled by the sudden sound. His hand trembled and the cup of water almost fell out of his hand. Fortunately, Dale was quick and took it. He looked at Kinzu with some shame. "Am I so scary?" Kinzu smiled awkwardly and reached out to take the cup. "Why do you make no sound when you walk? What if you scare the children?" Dale rolled her eyes and ignored Kinzu, but stared at the cup in his hand with some confusion. "Didn't you feed the medicine for today just now?" Kinzu turned his head and looked downstairs. No one noticed the abnormality here, so he pulled Dale forward and said, "Nothing, I thought about increasing the dosage today to try. After all, seeing them lying there unable to move, I feel bad." Dale's eyes turned and looked at Kinzu with some disbelief. Did something happen? Huh. Kinzu was stunned. He could see this. Dale curled her lips. "When have you ever taken the initiative to come and care about them?" Kinzu scratched his head awkwardly. "Well, isn't it because they are all women? It's a little inconvenient. I can't be around them all day long, right? Okay, just tell me if you have anything to say." Dale rolled her eyes at this guy. "You are the only one who has not been around women enough." Kinzu hesitated for a moment, opened the door of his bedroom, and walked in with Dale. Unfortunately, he didn't realize that when he just pulled Dale into the room, he was seen by Haley, who had just come upstairs. Haley opened her mouth wide, looking at the bedroom door in disbelief, not knowing what she wanted to say. In the bedroom, Dale stood up with an angry face and said angrily, "These island dwarfs are so hateful, boss. Don't worry, I will find them out." Kinzu waved his hand, signaling Dale not to get excited, and said with a wry smile, "I know you can do it, but no matter what, the strength of one person is still a little weak. Wouldn't it be better to have a few helpers?" Seeing Dale nodded in agreement, Kinzu breathed a sigh of relief and continued, "Besides, you have been with me for so long, and I have always let you run around outside. It must not be easy. After all, you were a bodyguard and can't always do these things. Boss, these are nothing. After all, you have been so kind to our family." Kinzu waved his hand to stop Dale from speaking, and said seriously, "Dale, those are not important. The important thing is that I admire your performance very much. Besides, those are just a piece of cake for me." But Dale opened her mouth and wanted to say something. Kinzu interrupted Dale again, not dwelling on this topic, and said, "Okay, let's go see Erica. I'll try my best to get her to stand up today." "What?" Dale was stunned for a moment, and forgot what she wanted to say. She looked at Kinzu in disbelief. "Boss, you mean, can Erica stand up today?" "Of course, I said that if I can get her to stand up today, she will definitely be able to stand up." Kinzu nodded slightly, with one hand behind his back, looking like a master. It's just a pity that the smug smile on the corner of his mouth destroyed this artistic conception. But Dale didn't care about the artistic conception. She grabbed Kinzu's arm and walked out. "Hurry, boss, hurry up." Haley, who had just arrived at the door, happened to hear this sentence. Her thoughts, which were already a little distorted, were distorted to the Pacific Ocean. She ran downstairs in a hurry with a red face. Dale dragged her to Erica's room. Looking at Erica, who was a little confused, Dale was about to say something excitedly when she heard Kinzu cough twice. "Erica, let's go next door first. I have something to discuss with you." Dale turned around a little confused. "Didn't we agree to treat the disease? Why go next door?" Kinzu didn't explain and pushed Erica, who was a little confused, to his bedroom. After entering the room, Erica hadn't spoken yet, and Dale couldn't help but ask hurriedly, "Clean, what are you doing?" Kinzu rolled his eyes. He was not ready to cure all of them yet, so he could only say helplessly, "Sister, let's do it one by one first. You don't want the people around you to feel uncomfortable, right?" Dale smiled embarrassedly, and finally calmed down and stopped talking. Erica looked at the two of them with some curiosity, and couldn't help asking, "What are you talking about? What do you mean by one by one?" "Thank you Umal for the 500 starting coins reward, thank you." "Oh, for the reward support, thank you." Chapter 550. Erica stands up. Kinzu came back to his senses, shrugged his shoulders, and said with a smile, "Erica, I want to try to see if I can make you stand up today." Erica was stunned when she heard this. It took her a long time to react. She asked excitedly, "Clean, are you telling the truth?" Kinzu smiled and nodded. Without saying anything, he handed over the cup of spiritual liquid in his hand. Erica took the cup and drank it all without hesitation. Then, there was a bang, and the glass cup shattered into slag. Erica fainted on the bed. "Ah!" Dale screamed in fear and rushed over. Erica, are you okay?" Kinzu was also a little dumbfounded and scratched his head. The drug shouldn't be so strong, right? After calling for a long time without any response, Dale hurriedly turned around and looked at Kinzu. "Clean, what happened to Erica?" Kinzu heard this, stepped forward and put his hand on Erica's philtrum to test, and his expression became relaxed. "Don't worry, she's fine, it's just that the drug is transforming her body." Turning around, looking at Dale's worried face, he smiled and said, "Don't disturb her, it will be almost done when she wakes up." "Really?" Dale stood there a little at a loss, not knowing whether to believe Kinzu. "Don't worry, when have I ever lied to you?" Kinzu raised his hand to swear. Dale thought about it. It seemed that Kinzu had never lied to her, so she believed Kinzu's words and followed him out of the room. Kinzu and the others did not walk far. He didn't know when Erica would wake up, so he simply waited on the second floor, looking in from time to time. When Kinzu looked in more than a dozen times and waited impatiently, Erica in the bedroom seemed to move. Kinzu blinked his eyes and rushed in, leaving Dale outside. Reaching out, Kinzu helped Erica up as she tried to sit up, and asked with concern, "How is it, Erica? How do you feel?" "God." Erica shook her head, blinked her charming blue eyes, and said in disbelief, "Clean, I feel great now, really, great." She tried to stand up from the bed regardless of Kinzu's support. Dale, who was at the door, covered her mouth with her hands to prevent herself from screaming. What did she see? Erica, who had been bedridden for nearly a month and was declared incurable by the doctor, actually stood up by her own strength. "Oh, thank God, is this true?" Dale leaned against the bedroom door and couldn't help but burst into tears. In the bedroom, Erica was not much better. The beautiful blue eyes were already filled with tears, and the voice choked with sobs. "Clean, thank you so much." Kinzu smiled and breathed a sigh of relief. At present, the situation seemed to be very good. "This is what I should do, isn't it, Erica?" "No." Erica shook her head and looked at Kinzu sincerely. "Clean, Erica's life will belong to you from now on, because it is you who gave her a new life." Looking at her pure blue eyes, Kinzu smiled with satisfaction in his heart, turned to look at Dale, and said, "You accompany her to have a good chat, I will go down first." Dale nodded, and sent Kinzu away with tears in her eyes. As soon as he left, the two comrades who had shared hardships immediately hugged each other and burst into tears. No one knew what they had experienced during this period, and no one would know that whenever Dale saw Erica, her heart was full of guilt. Listening to the crying and laughing in the bedroom, Kinzu shrugged and walked downstairs by himself. "Clean, you, at the stairs." Haley looked at Kinzu, who was walking down with a refreshed look, opened her mouth, wanted to ask something, but didn't know how to start. "What's wrong? What are you doing here?" Kinzu looked at Haley with some confusion, and went straight to the sofa and sat down. "You and Sister Dale are upstairs." Haley stretched out her hand and gestured, which made Kinzu puzzled. Reaching out, in Haley's stunned expression, Kinzu touched her forehead and asked in confusion, "You don't have a fever, why are you talking nonsense?" Haley rolled her eyes, opened Kinzu's hand, and ran to the side with a blushing face. Kinzu laughed twice, exaggeratedly put his hand under his nose and smelled it, showing a look of enjoyment. Haley couldn't stand it anymore, and cursed him in a low voice as a hooligan, and got up and ran to the door. Kinzu shrugged, and just when he was about to say something, he heard footsteps behind him. Looking back, Dale supported Erica and hobbled downstairs. Needless to say, Erica's recovery naturally caused a burst of exclamations from the women in the villa. But what followed was that their curiosity about Kinzu became more serious. Dale and Diva were better, especially the three sisters Mobeka, who looked at Kinzu with stars in their eyes. For them, this was simply a miracle. As these female soldiers gradually recovered, everyone went from being surprised at the beginning to being numb in the end. Looking at Kinzu sitting on the sofa as if nothing had happened, Mobeka, Onid, and Haley, the three big horses, surrounded him together, looking him up and down with an expression as if they had seen a monster. "What's wrong? Am I handsome again?" Kinzu teased the three women knowingly. The three rolled their eyes together, and Mobeka asked, Keen, do you know magic? What magic? Kinzu was stunned and a little nervous. If you don't know magic, how did you heal Sister Erica's injury? Onid grabbed her hair, looking unacceptable. Oh, this. Kinzu breathed a sigh of relief, and seeing the three people looking forward to it, he smiled and dragged out a long-tail tone. Keep it secret. TSK. Kinzu waved his hand nonchalantly, and instructed. This matter must be kept secret, understand? Don't tell anyone else. Why? Haley looked at Kinzu in confusion. Isn't it said that the more famous the doctor is, the more money he makes? You also said that others are famous, but what about me? Kinzu smiled bitterly and glanced at the silly girl. If you publicize my place, it will probably not be long before the police come to seal my door. Now, the three girls were even more puzzled, and they all looked at Kinzu, hoping that he could explain it clearly. Kinzu covered his forehead. Are these girls out of touch with society or what? Don't you know that I am practicing medicine without a license? Findi est captulo much as great as pelaga hasta el final. No esse olvidentidal like bus gasms contenido exclusivo ixo immediato. Si scrubata newstero patrian. Recurada, carda like, si scripsino donacinos anima a continue. Great as a todos nos vemos on el próximo video.